Okay, we are live. Welcome to the live stream for what is today, January 17th, 2018. My name is Dana Morningstar, and this is a live stream that we do every Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and it runs for about 3 hours. So welcome. Renee is here. Desmond, welcome. Renee says, hi, I'm new to your channel. Well, welcome. There's a lot going on here. We've got just kind of FYI, we've got three different support groups going on right now. One on my website, which is also called Thrive After Abuse. You can find me at thriveafterabuse.com. And we have a support group on Facebook called Thrive After Abuse. And then we have a new group on Facebook called 365 I Thrive. So every group has its own feel, if you're interested. See, Desmond, Carol, Karen, D-Mel, Narc Free, Heather, and says she's also sort of new. Well, hi, welcome. AJ, Victoria, Green Eyes. So have you guys, I don't know if anybody here is reading the book club book that we're going to be discussing this month, which is Codependency for Dummies. So it's a great book so far. It's just chock full of information and it's fantastic. I love it. So if you're new to all of this, or even if you're not so new to all of this, if you're curious about boundaries and oh gosh, just all of it, that's a fantastic book. It might resonate more if a person's a little further down the path to healing. And I would recommend, frankly, it's one of those books that I really recommend anybody and everybody read, because even though you might have had perfectly healthy boundaries before this happened, odds are they've been eroded in ways that you are not even aware of yet. It's seriously, I am about 7 years out, and I am still connecting the dots with all of this in my own life. And books like that have just been very eye-opening for me. So pieces of the puzzle I wasn't even looking for. Just very, very helpful. So we're doing that. We're doing the book club for that book, Codependency for Dummies. It's by Darlene Lancer, by the way. That book club discussion is January 25th. And we're probably going to do 2 days. I'm not sure if we're going to do, that's a Thursday. I'm not sure if we're going to be doing like Thursday, Friday, or if we're going to go like the next week. I need to talk to Shay and see kind of what she wants to do with all of that. Let's see. D-Mel says, oh boy, what a title. Yeah. Well, it's one of those books that's in like the For Dummies series, like, car repair for dummies or accounting for dummies or whatever. But yeah, terrible title, but it's a fantastic book. Fantastic book. Hands down the best book I've read for sure on codependency. And even if a person doesn't identify with being codependent, it's still a fantastic read. She talks about like, who was I was talking to Agatha the other day in one of the groups, and she was like, oh my God, I'm highlighting like 80% of this book. I'm like, me too. I've been typing out all these notes and I have like 40 pages of notes. I'm like, I'm just retyping this whole book because it's so fantastic. So there's just lots of info in there. Let's see here. James was saying he was in a recovery group on Facebook, and he was removed because they were saying that he was showing narcissistic tendencies. So now he's worried he's a narcissist. And can two narcissists be in a relationship? That's a big question. So first of all, like narcissistic behavior is within the realm of like human behavior. right? It's not like so abnormal that it's like you're a zombie or a vampire, right? Like it's just kind of that spectrum of problematic behavior. And it's very, very common for people after they get out of an abusive relationship to have picked up a lot of that behavior. There's a term for that. It's called fleas. And there's also another term that kind of pertains to all this, which is, the term is reactive abuse. So I would kind of take that all into account. If you're really concerned, wondering to yourself, oh my gosh, is it me? Could this be me? Odds are it's probably not you. Because if you're, and here's the thing too, I think everybody really who is introspective and kind of, as you're coming across this information, it's normal to start seeing some of this stuff and being like, oh man, I've done some of this stuff before too. And what does that make me? Maybe I've done the silent treatment, or I've done, projection or whatever. But like I said, all people in general, we all do this stuff. Whether we're aware of it or not is another story. Narcissists do this stuff to an extreme because their behavior is to an extreme. So if you're seeing stuff within yourself where you're like, I've handled these certain situations in the past, I didn't realize that it was a problem, or maybe I even realized it was a problem and I want to handle it different. It's more of kind of where you are today and bringing that problematic behavior within ourselves to the surface and then being willing to work on it. The problem with narcissists, and I know you've heard me say this before, is it's not even so much their behavior, although that is incredibly problematic. What's problematic is they are either completely unaware of it, right? They're gaslighting, they're projecting, they're denying, they're blaming, all of those things. When a person's not being sincerely accountable for their behavior, that's what they do, because they can't handle the truth. So they've got to blame somebody else for all of their actions. So with narcissists, it's not so much the behavior, it's the extent, it's the extremes of their behavior, and it's their lack of sincere accountability, because in their mind, it's always somebody else's fault. And they oftentimes, because they don't own their behavior, they are not motivated to change anything. So if you see, like I said, if you see problematic stuff within yourself and you're like, man, wow, I need to really watch that within myself, or, man, my mom or my dad used to do that to me when I was a kid, and I catch myself doing that now and I want to work on it, then that's fantastic, because you're aware of it. And frankly, if any of us is walking around thinking that we don't have problematic behavior at all, odds are we're deeply unaware of a lot of our behavior, because we all have it. It's just kind of to like what extent, So I hope that helps kind of understand all of this, It's the degree and frequency of how problematic a person's behavior is the problem. Let's see. Leslie asked Dana, hi, which book are you talking about? It is the Codependency for Dummies by Darlene Lancer, and it's fantastic. Postmodern's talking about the behavior and says, yeah, we have this, but we're not all destructive. Absolutely. Degree and frequency is the thing, right? Like everybody lies. And people lie. People in general lie when they can't handle the truth. If they're not comfortable with the truth, that's when they lie. And I gave the example last week. I went with a friend to an open house, and she wasn't comfortable telling the realtor that we were just bored and out driving around looking at open houses. And so she'd concocted this whole story about my brother moving into town and wanting us to house hunt. And I, to me, that was just so wild, because it's like, why lie about that? Why not just say, hey, we're driving around, we saw the open house sign, and we just wanted to come in because we like looking at houses. Do you see what I'm saying? So people lie, but I mean, if you're talking like double lives and they're gaslighting and they're being all kinds of squirrely and all of that stuff, that's way outside the realm of normal lying. And I'm not trying to excuse even normal lying, but I think it's examples like that, examples where we think that might not be a big deal, little tiny lies. Somebody calls and we don't call back right away and we make up a story. Oh, our phone died, or we forgot, or what have you. Instead to look within and be like, okay, well, why am I not comfortable with the truth? Because generally it's a boundary issue. We're either uncomfortable saying no, or we're feeling the need to kind of be people pleasing, or we're just not comfortable with asserting ourselves. So it's such a game changer when we can start looking at our own behavior and figuring out, why are we doing what we're doing? Mala, you are so spot on, girl. She says, you can't practice what was not taught. And what if you were not taught boundaries? Okay, fantastic point. So most people are not, like, they're really not taught boundaries. And it's one of those things, frankly, with all of this, most people, we're not taught about dangerous people. I think the conversations, at least that I grew up with, as far as dangerous people went, don't talk to strangers, don't take candy from a stranger. If a stranger says, he's got a puppy, like, don't fall for that, because that would have totally been like what would have gotten me, because I'm a sucker for animals. So those conversations, but it was very, very specific, right? I mean, and outside of that, it wasn't discussed about how to be assertive, and that it's okay to say no, and honor your intuition, and learn to tap into your emotions. And emotions are a really fantastic feedback loop that we all have, male and female, that kind of clue us into our physical environment, our external environment, as well as our internal environment. So a lot of, like, the really important discussions around all of this aren't being had. And frankly, the people, at least that I've met in my life, that have fantastic boundaries are the ones that had no boundaries and were kind of just dragged through hell by either being married to an abusive person or an addict or an alcoholic, and they developed boundaries over time. So even if a person comes from a really fantastic, loving, healthy family, if this stuff is really not taught in specifics, it's not intuitive. Although, I guess let me back up. It is intuitive, but we're talked out of that as children. Children are taught, basically, don't say no, don't question me, you need to do what you're told. So by the time a child is in elementary school, they are so far out of whack with their wants and needs and thoughts and feelings about things that they're taught to be compliant, is what it is. And so, when a person grows up like that, and every child, I think, really does, for the most part, by the time they're an adult, most people don't know, and then they hit 40 generally. And then there's kind of this quote unquote midlife crisis where they realize, what, oh my gosh, I'm 40 now. And they get a divorce, and they probably have a couple kids, and they hate their job. And they're like, wait a minute, what life am I living? How did I get here? I'm not this person. Like, I don't like my spouse. I don't like my job. I don't like my car. I don't like, my life. And then they kind of just start taking radical action to overcorrect the situation. And, in kind of this frenzied attempt at finding themselves again. But I think the reality is most people don't even know who they are to begin with, because we're taught to fall in line. We're taught to fall into the system, whether that system is a school system, or fall in line with our parents' beliefs or religious beliefs or cultural, or all of the above. So back to your question, what if you're not taught boundaries? It's a lot of practice, and it's a lot about learning what healthy boundaries are. This book, this Codependency for Dummies, is fantastic. I would say this book is huge. Like this book is just so chock full of information. This book is fantastic. And then the book by Adeline Birch on boundaries after a pathological relationship. I would start with the boundaries after a pathological relationship. I think if you haven't already read that, it's fantastic. She really spells out that book, in my opinion, the boundaries after a pathological relationship. That book really spells out, okay, what are healthy boundaries? What are weak boundaries? Kind of what are non-existent boundaries? And how can you tell? Paying attention, what kind of emotion does a person experience when they have healthy boundaries? And well, let's just talk about that for a second. So when a person has healthy boundaries, so much of this is just really getting back into alignment, like with our authentic self, or some people call it like the quote unquote inner child. And it's your original self. It's your wants, your thoughts, your feelings, your needs. And for a lot of people, they find it helpful to think about who you were when you were like, before the world got a hold of you, basically, when you were like 5 or 6 years old, before you had all of these influences from like religion and culture and friends and school and all of this. Who were you, and what did you like and what didn't you like? And that inner self is always there within us. And so we can tap into it at any time. And our emotions are a lot like our internal GPS system. So when we're a little bit off track, it starts chiming at us, like, please return to the highlighted route. Please return to the highlighted route. And the more we kind of go off the path, the more it keeps, chiming at us. So, and when we're on the path, we don't hear that voice, right? Like we're just kind of on the path. Emotionally speaking, when we're off the path, it generally starts off with feelings of like irritation, frustration, which can very quickly grow into resentment, anger, lashing out, rage, drastic action, drastic reaction, maybe, all kinds of like maybe oftentimes either aggressive behavior or passive aggressive behavior, because we don't know how to say no and we don't know how to assert ourselves. So somebody might ask us, hey, can you watch my kids all weekend long? And if we're not comfortable with saying no to that, we might be like, yeah, okay. And then get really resentful about that and let that build up and build up and build up. And in order to maybe get around doing that, because we didn't want to do it to begin with, we might call them on Thursday and say, oh, you know what, I'm sick. We might have some sort of excuse that comes up because, again, we're not comfortable actually just saying, no, that's too much for me. So paying attention to how you feel, it's a great indicator of whether or not your boundaries have been crossed. And really, boundaries are one of those things that, we can get clear ahead of time, kind of what your boundaries are, what your standards are, what your deal breakers are, but you will know when they get crossed. And they can be crossed in all different kinds of ways. And here's the thing too with boundaries is nobody else knows where your boundaries are except for you. So even though some of the stuff is, that's super outrageous, that a person might come across, especially with a person with that kind of this pathological personality, where you're like, I shouldn't have to set a boundary. I shouldn't have to let them know that like sexually harassing me is not okay, or that, pathological lying or stealing or any of this stuff is okay. And I agree. Like we shouldn't have, this goes back to what I call, trying to teach the basics of adult behavior to another adult. Like to me, that's an automatic deal breaker. Like if somebody doesn't have that stuff mastered, then I'm not looking for a project, So, and odds are they don't want to be fixed. So anything that came my way is only going to serve to annoy them and frustrate me. So I just kind of bow out and go my separate way with that. But so the point being is with boundaries, a lot of it takes practice, and odds are once you start really waking up to it and I don't know, it's such a game changer that you'll become more and more aware of it, and you'll practice it more and more. And then you'll start to realize, okay, I'm, you know, so like the situation with my friend last weekend, totally not even a thing at all for her. Probably for most people, not even a big thing to do. Like, well, why not just lie about that, you know? But it's the little things like that that kind of get us out of alignment with our authentic self. And the more we're in, it's just seriously such a good feeling to just be on the level about stuff, you know. And I don't know about you, but I can barely remember stuff that actually happens, let alone like made up stories and excuses. It's mentally draining to try to remember a bunch of stuff it's not real, you know? That is a good question, Victoria. She says, "Hi, Dana. Thank you for the great notes on your website. I would love to be able to highlight as I read, like Kindle reading. Would you know if there is a way to read and use highlighting?" I don't know of anything, but if somebody does know of something like that, please let me know. So I don't know. I will look. I wonder, the software that my website uses is called Word. I use WordPress is the platform that my website's on. So maybe there's a WordPress plugin that allows for something like that. I need to make a note because like I was just saying, I can barely remember stuff like as it is, let alone. Okay. WordPress plugin for highlighting. I will look into that and I'll hopefully have an answer for you by next week. Let's see. And James is talking about the group. He said, "It just scared me so much that I'm the problem and that I'm a narcissist. And I called my therapist to try to go in today and talk and ask her opinion about it." Well, James, too, I have two groups, and you might, I don't know. I think for people that are concerned about joining large groups, I would encourage you to give my website group a go. That group it's very slow paced. Facebook groups are just boom, 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 boom. They're so active. Our Facebook group, the Thrive After Abuse Facebook group, I'll have to check the stats, but we get close to like 700, 800,000 comments and posts and interaction a month. It is just off the chart. It is, and we just went to where we are moderating each of the posts. So we like, oh gosh, we screen every video, we read every article, we go through every single thing. And I would say on average, I know for just me alone, I probably approve, I would say around 40 or 50 posts a day. And that's just me. And there's like, I don't even know, 6 or 7 other moderators in that group. So it's a lot, and things can just, it can be a lot. So the website group is a lot slower pace. I think it's a more close knit type thing. There's my website group, the two admins that are in there, George and Beck, are fantastic. And George is, I mean, don't get me wrong, all of the admins are absolutely fantastic. George really is very familiar with this information and spends a ton of time giving very detailed, wonderful explanations on stuff. So I would encourage you. And then you can also, pick your own screen name, unlike Facebook, that it's like tied to your personal profile. So that just might be something you're interested in. Tammy says, "I was on the phone and a coworker kept talking to me. I put my finger up and mouthed, 'I'm on the phone.' And she said, 'Screw you. I don't want to run to management, but I'm not okay with that.'" Yeah, I don't blame you, and that kind of stuff can just be so draining and can create such a hostile work environment. And and it's going to be obviously be up to you as to how to handle it, but you could always go to her later. I don't know what kind of dynamic you guys normally have or had before that happened, but you could always say to her, when you told me that the other day, like, I'm just really not okay with being talked to like that. And in the future, I don't know, in the future, please don't talk to me like that. Or, yeah, I guess leave it at that. Please don't talk to me like that. Because you're definitely in the right, and it's not okay for her to say stuff like that. A lot of times people too, what they will say is like, oh, well, I was just joking. Like they'll do something, inappropriate like that, or mean or cruel or teasing. A lot of narcissists will do stuff like that. It's very common. They'll be verbally abusive and then chalk it up to, oh, I was just kidding. But the reality is, saying something hurtful and then adding, oh, I was just kidding to the end of it doesn't make that okay. And other people don't get to decide whether or not, like, the impact of their behavior. So that's very immature communication. So for example, let's say you and I were coworkers, right? And you were to do that to me, and I were to be the one that said, hey, screw you. And let's even assume that I was joking when I said that, right? Let's say we're kind of work friends and I was joking around, and that you didn't like that. You're like, that's kind of crossing the line. Most people, if you were to say, hey, you know what? That just really crossed a line with me. Most people would say, hey, you know what? I'm sorry. And then it wouldn't happen again. People with a lack of accountability, and pathological personalities, they don't do that. They will continue to argue and defend their point of view and, blame you. Oh, you can't take a joke. You're too sensitive. You're making a big deal out of nothing. They fight and fight and fight about their bad behavior, and that kind of stuff. It's crazy making, and it's exhausting, and it's just not even worth it, because you're dealing at that point. It's very clear. Like, okay, I'm dealing with a child in an adult body, and, and that's exhausting. James, our main Facebook group is called Thrive After Abuse. There's the page and then there's the group. So make sure to just be aware of which one you're posting in if you are going to join. So let's see. Let me. Scroll. There's a lot of just a lot of good, different conversations going on in the chat here. Heather, that's a great question. She says, do covert narcissists come out way too late with the supposed empathy once the relationship is destroyed? Is it hoovering? When you're dealing with a manipulative person, it's a good idea to just assume that everything that they're doing is manipulative, because it's very difficult to tell when a person is being truthful if they have a history of lying. And frankly, there really has to just come a point where we have to just look at, the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. And so if a person has that pattern of saying whatever they need to say in order to get out of trouble, like, odds are they're not sincere. And in order to build up that appropriate trust, to assume that their empathy was sincere, frankly, as far as I'm concerned, you're talking 3 to 5 years of appropriate behavior over like that consistent period of time. If a person's got a history of doing stuff, it's not a switch that they're going to flip and then all of a sudden, not be lying and cheating and stealing and what have you. So that's why that kind of stuff, to me, is just an app. I don't try to make myself crazy anymore like I used to, trying to figure out, well, this time do they mean it? And, like, are they really a narcissist, or are they just, do they just have like narcissistic behavior, or are they really a sociopath, or do they just have like sociopathic behavior, and could they change? And this, this time they found religion, or this time they sobered up, and this time they said they were sorry. They've never said they were sorry before. Or, this time they cried. They never cried before. Seriously, none of that even matters. It's all it is it's consistent behavior over a long standing period of time. And like I said, for me, 3 to 5 years, 3 to 5 years, not a week, not 3 days, not 5 days, years before that trust can be built up again. And especially if we're talking like egregious acts of broken trust, like cheating, taking loans out in a person's name, this kind of thing. And that's one of the reasons too, where it's not even about us trying to figure out their behavior. Like, are they sincere or are they insincere? And can they be trusted? And are they a narcissist, or, are they just a person with a bunch of problematic behavior? Like, kind of, where are they? It's about turning inward and figuring out, okay, where's my line in the sand? And I will tell you from my experience, what was some real game changers for me is I used to have the mindset of, my deal breakers were basically abuse, addiction, adultery. Those were my main three. But even then, when I say abuse, I was talking like physical abuse. Like, if a guy ever hit me, I would be out the door. I always had that in my mind of, that's not. But it's okay. It's one thing to even say that. It's another thing to actually live it, because so much stuff even happens way before that, right? And there's verbal abuse and emotional abuse and psychological abuse. And oftentimes there's, pinching and shoving and, all different, that physical, it slowly escalates over time. So rarely does it just escalate from a verbal fight to actually, getting hit. But anyhow, so this was my old mindset. Was physical abuse was a deal breaker. Adultery that I could prove without a shadow of a doubt was a deal breaker in my mind. The reality was I didn't really know what I was looking for as far as concrete proof, because, I had been with guys who were very, now in hindsight being what it is, very obviously cheating. Other women were sending them sexy pictures and all kinds of inappropriate texts and this, that, and the other. But it's like, I don't even know what I needed. I needed to find a naked woman in his bed in order to fully believe it, because I'd get caught up and, they knock you off balance with these spinning it around and blaming you. And what were you doing looking at my phone? And how did you do this? And I can't trust you. Or of course I cheated on you. She was gorgeous, or you weren't there, or she threw herself at me. There's all these other things that would kind of just get me off the trail. So abuse, addiction, and then addiction. Again, it was only that extreme of, if a person is, blackout drunk on a regular basis, then I would leave. And so over time, I really had to rein that in and be like, nope, abuse of any kind is a deal breaker. Active addiction, really of any kind, is a deal breaker, especially if it's destructive. Adultery of any kind, emotional, they're flirting with somebody else, whatever. Like, I'm not okay with that. Abuse, addiction, adultery, and attitude. That was a big one that I also added, of if a person's got, a persistently like negative, problematic attitude where they're, I don't need somebody constantly criticizing me or trying to control me or being condescending or just being a giant wet blanket on every idea I have. Like, I don't want that in my life. So that was a big thing, kind of getting clear on that. But then too, what really helped kind of kick that into gear was also realizing that I don't do persistently confusing behavior, and I don't do crazy making. And I also don't do anybody that treats me with disdain, contempt, or hostility. So any of those things are deal breakers. And I will tell you, the amount of peace in my life from getting rid of people that persistently confusing and crazy making has been huge. So that's how to stop a lot of like the crazy that's downstream, how to stop a lot of that stuff upstream, and just realize that any relationship that's taking a toll on your emotional health, where it's, you're playing detective, you're trying to figure it out, you're finding yourself exhausted, you don't really trust them, it's just not even worth it. So, okay, let's see. Sable says, dang, Dana, you wanted irrefutable evidence. I'm not that trusting, but I tend to believe them when they're away. Yeah, it's weird. I mean, at the time, I always knew cheating was a deal breaker, but I guess I never really knew what cheating looked like, you know? Like you see it in movies where it's like, you can tell they're cheating. He's got lipstick on his collar. He smells like perfume. There's the other woman. Like things are very kind of cut and dry. But the reality is cheating oftentimes isn't so cut and dry. And even if it is, even if there is lipstick on the collar and perfume and all of that, it can, when you're dealing with the person that lies all the time, they're going to have excuses for their behavior. And if we really want to believe them, then we're probably going to continue to believe their excuses because we don't want to see the situation for what it is. So, but yeah, I think just getting clear about all that is just really huge. Victorious, you're welcome, says, thank you for saying that none of that matters. The trying to figure it all out is disheartening. I am so grateful you keep on point with your experience in studying. I appreciate your time. Yes, you are so welcome. And it really does help to make it about you, like I don't do crazy making and I don't do perpetually confusing. It's just not worth it. Because when you're dealing with somebody who lies, they're going to continue giving more lies. And then that's just going to make that confusion worse. Because really, when we're talking about that confusion, what we're talking about is manipulation. Because normal relationships, sincere relationships with sincere communication aren't confusing. The reason they're confusing is because you're getting half truths and some lies, and there is no open, honest, sincere, solutions oriented communication there. And if that's not there, then there is no relationship there. I mean, those are all key ingredients for a healthy relationship, you know? Okay, let's see. Heather says, yeah, he's already moved out and gone. Yay, good. Yay, that's exciting. I could never trust him again. He says he's just emotionally immature and that I, quote unquote, showed him how to grow. All the abuse except physical, but he grabbed my arm angrily. Yeah. And, one of the things that abusive people will also, one of the responses that they will come back with is oftentimes, well, I need you. Like, I need you to teach me these things. Or with, your love, together, we can solve this. Together, we can fix this. I can get help, or I'll get help for you. Or now I really want to change, these kinds of things. And more often than not, it's just a bunch of words to keep the other person on the line. And I would even go back to, what I was saying before. My default is give me 3 years of appropriate behavior, then maybe, depending on where their behavior is within that spectrum, I would maybe consider getting to know that person again. But if their behavior falls within my deal breakers, I'm done. Like it's not even worth it. Like that book, Daring Greatly by Brene Brown. One of the concepts in there, she talked about trust being like a marble jar. And she was saying her daughter, when she was in elementary school, the teacher, if the class was good, she would drop in a marble into this jar. And if the class was bad, she would take a marble out of the jar. And then after the jar was filled up, the class had, like a pizza party or something. And she said, it's a lot like trust. Trust is something that's earned over time. If a person shows that they can be trusted with whatever, certain things, right? Like telling you the truth or showing up on time or, being respectful, or you tell them something in confidence and they respect the fact that you've told them this, these kinds of things, those add a marble to the jar. But if somebody does something that's absolutely outrageous, if they're treating you with like disdain, contempt, hostility, if they're, you know, acting in a way that's way over the top, cheating, abuse, addiction, adultery, basically, then in my book, those are all worthy of dumping out that marble jar and just being done. Like no second chances given. That's just outrageous stuff. So Heather says, yes, always a bunch of words. He says he'll honor my asking for no contact. He lied to me day one. I don't trust him enough to wait and see if I have no idea what he does when I can't see. Absolutely. Absolutely. I would use this opportunity to just go ahead and block him across the board. I would set up his email to go directly to spam, and I would anticipate that he's probably going to reach out to you in a few weeks. And it's probably going to be something seemingly benign or even caring, like Happy Valentine's Day. You were the love of my life. I messed up big time. You don't need to answer me back. Just know that I care. Some BS like that. So prepare yourself emotionally to hear from him again. And so that way you're not knocked off balance when that does happen. Because you're right. If you can't trust him with stuff, if you can't trust him, you can't trust him, I was going to tell you I was talking about the Boundaries book and then the difference between the Codependency for Dummies book. So the Boundaries book, I think, is fantastic because it really speaks specifically about boundaries. The Codependency book, Codependency for Dummies, she has I would say the last 50% or so of the book is all about us getting in tune with us. It's about learning to trust yourself again, your perceptions, getting in tune with your wants, your needs, your emotions. She's got a ton of exercises in there. It's just absolutely fantastic. So I was kind of thinking for book club, what we would do is, I think, divide the book in half. But again, I need to see if Shay is going to do book club with me this month or what we're doing. If we divide it in half, I think we'll do the first half about kind of understanding about codependency in one book club. And then the second one, the focusing on, okay, let's get back in tune with ourselves. What does that look like? Where do we begin? Because it's just, that book is fantastic. It just really, really is. PPWW says misandry. There's a lot of that going on in support groups. Why? Well, I think, support groups, especially for abuse, I would say they're primarily women. They're probably 98, 99% women. And there's a lot of women that have been abused by men. So let's just say the support group itself is 99% women. It's probably, of that, I would say it's 98% straight women that have been abused by men. So there are women in there that have been abused by other women, and there are men in there that have been abused by women, and there's men in there that have been abused by other men. But I think primarily because it's women that have been abused by men, there's a lot of focus on, and this happens in any type of like traumatic situation. People start lumping things together. And frankly, this has been the discussion that surrounded domestic violence for a very long time, is that women were the victims and that men were, the abusers. It just wasn't really understood that a woman could be abusive. So, times they are changing, and this kind of stuff is being more readily acknowledged. And I was looking up statistics. This was a while ago, and I was shocked and horrified by what I was finding as far as the data that had not been tracked for men. I did not realize, and I'd have to go back and recheck the numbers, but the data for rape of men and domestic violence didn't start until fairly recently. Like, I want to say something like 20 years ago. Like, there's just really not data before that point. So, just kind of as a society as a whole, it just hasn't really been understood as anything other than a female issue. And so it's very common when you have a bunch of people that have all been hurt by another type of people to think, okay, men are the problem, when in fact, it's the abusive behavior that's the problem. And it's so important that we see that it's the abusive behavior so we can have our radar set to scan. And this is one of the ongoing things, that conversations that we do have in the support groups. People, when anybody gets hurt by anything, they will link up incorrect, more likely than not, incorrect cause and effect. So it's very common for people to think, okay, okay, I'm going to stay away from all Scorpios from here on out because I've encountered 3 of them. They've all been abusive. I'm done with Scorpios. Or I'm never going to date an older, man again. Or I'm never going to date an attorney again. Or and then it kind of progresses to like, okay, well, I'm never going to date men again. This is actually a fairly common thing. And then women are like, okay, men are the problem. They're all pigs. They're all dogs. I'll start dating women. And then what do they find? Sure enough, boom, they crash into an abusive woman. So it's a very real, very real thing out there. A person, if their radar is just not set to scan for abusive behavior, and so much of this, it starts off slow and subtle. Most abusive people come across as, friendly and likable and charming and intense. That's probably probably one of the bigger red flags, is that level of intensity. But that love bombing, all of that stuff can feel like I finally met this amazing, perfect person. And so then when things start to kind of start turning south, then they're confused by what they're experiencing. Most abusive people don't tend to come across as abusive people. If they did, we would all kind of know how to avoid them, So we try to kind of keep that conversation gender neutral. Our support group, I feel like, has really come a long way, and which is exciting, because I think here's the other thing too, not just from like a politically correct standpoint, but from a being aware of abuse in general standpoint. And there's a lot of people that are like, oh my gosh, it wasn't even on my radar to think of abuse outside of a male-female dynamic. And yeah, you know what? I had this friend at work who was actually really controlling and abusive. I used to joke that it was an abusive relationship, but I never thought it could be because we were both female and we worked together. Or, you know what, actually, my mother's a lot like this, or my father was a lot like this, but I didn't realize it as abusive because they were my parent. So it's a very needed conversation. It's like any other conversation when these changes start happening. It's we're kind of on the crest of the wave with all of that. So it's new territory. And if you're a guy who's uncomfortable in a support group, and I will tell you, as a person who runs a very large support groups do tend to attract a lot of predatory men. That's a very real thing. And so that's an issue that we've had in our group. A lot of the guys that are in there are fantastic. And I just, think the world of them. And I'm so glad that they're comfortable and that they're in there. But it's something that's definitely more so on our radar, because there are a lot of women that are in there that are vulnerable, and, it's just can be kind of prime hunting grounds for a lot of the wrong people. Okay, let's see. That's a great question, Kelly. She says, Brene Brown on vulnerability. How do you think you did being vulnerable in 2017? That's a really great question. How do I think I was at being vulnerable? I think it's like anything else, or there's kind of a learning curve to it. I think if anything, my issue has been more about oversharing. Like, if anything, I feel like I might need to kind of rein that back a few notches. My focus for 2018 is really walking in my authenticity and really getting those things in alignment. Like I was saying, the other day with that open house thing, like in both big ways and little ways. But it's so much easier. Well, maybe it isn't easier, but to at least catch myself when I'm in these little situations like that, to just make sure that everything is in alignment, that I'm not, biting my tongue, or that I'm saying yes when I mean no, or kind of going with the flow, unnecessarily, or like that I'm following my needs and my wants, and that I'm focused more on when am I doing things that I'm not comfortable doing, and why? Like, why is that? So Heather, or Healthy Love, says, Dana, I am an intense person. I am high energy. I laugh loud. I'm very passionate, and I look people into the eyes. I hope that doesn't make me abusive. No, that does not make you abusive. So let's talk about that real quick. There's kind of this, I don't know what you would call it. I want to say logical fallacy, but that's not the correct term. I'm totally drawing a blank. So, like, for example, okay, here's kind of what I'm thinking of, trying to articulate. Like, you could say all cats are fluffy, but not all things that are fluffy are cats. Does that make sense? So all cats are, and then not all cats are fluffy, but all cats are, well, just for the sake of argument, all cats are furry, but not all things that are furry are cats. So, or some cats are furry, but not all things that are furry are cats. So many times abusive people are, many abusive people are intense, but not all people that are intense are necessarily abusive, if that makes sense. And in what you're describing too is, to me, that isn't necessarily intense. Intense for me, anyhow, how I'm thinking about it is more of the love bombing, the constant communication, the intense, staring into your soul kind of a thing, where, and it oftentimes leaves another person feeling like they've met their soulmate. It's generally unnerving. A person will leave that conversation or that interaction either feeling completely unnerved or like they've met their soulmate. That's how I describe that level of intensity that abusive people tend to have. So normal people don't have that level of intensity. But even then, like I wouldn't encourage people, to go around and be like, okay, well, are they intense? Or are they just kind of intense? Or, like, we don't need to focus on their behavior, focus on how it makes you feel. If something feels off, it's because something's off. And it doesn't, and frankly, even then, it doesn't even matter if it's you or if it's them. If hanging out with that other person, because a lot of people, what happens is they're like, oh, but I've got PTSD and, everything feels off, right? Everything feels off to me. And I can't tell why I'm having this reaction around this other person. But at the end of the day, it doesn't even matter. What matters is if you kind of make that decision to yourself of like, you know what, I can't be around other people. Like, I value my emotional health. I value my mental health. I don't do perpetually confusing, and I don't do crazy making. And so if you're feeling really knocked off balance by this other person, then that's all that matters. Doesn't matter if they're doing something, doesn't matter if it's your PTSD. What matters is there's something really off about the situation. It's time to back things up because it's not worth feeling that way. And then that's also a really good time to get grounded and think about, okay, do I feel this way with other people? Odds are it's only been with problematic people that you've felt that way. Think about somebody that you feel comfortable around, like a good friend or maybe a sibling. That for me, it's my brother. That I, feel totally comfortable and calm. Go aim for calm. Like, what gives you peace? Find the people in your life that give you peace or that bring calm, and try to have that feeling with everybody in your life. And if you're feeling, unnerved or distrusting or uncertain, or especially if it's causing anxiety or depression, or you're losing sleep, or you're not, and it's like changes in eating or changes in sleeping, that kind of stuff, like that's whatever friendship or work environment or relationship is not worth it. Yeah, healthy love says, yeah, I don't hurt people. Yeah. Yeah, it's, they're like, I think a lot of times for us that are more on the empathic side of the equation here, we also can tend to do love bombing. And we oftentimes love that whirlwind, and we contribute to it. And we just, that's because we're oftentimes so starved out. So it can be very confusing of like, well, wait a minute. I feel like I really wanted to talk to this person. We text like 6 hours a day, and it's, we just, within a week, and we were moving in together and things were just going full force. And that's a big part of the things for us, is to slow down and realize that part of treating ourselves with value and with dignity and respect is taking things slow. So a lot of it's with us is it's kind of relearning a lot of how we view the world and other people and our place in it. I had mentioned before, uh, the old me was all about moving. I was like, hey, I'm an open book. I was proud to be an open book. Um, really did not have healthy boundaries when it came to um, topics of conversation. And no, of course, granted, like it's different here. Like this might sound really, really wild, but it's different here on my YouTube channel because this is the topic. But in my personal life, I would answer any question because I didn't have a problem with being truthful about things. And so if somebody asked me deeply personal questions before I even really knew them, I didn't see a problem with that. The new me realizes, hey, you know what? It's, um, I don't open up to people like that right away anymore. Not because I'm scared of being hurt, but because I realize that it's about me valuing my time and my energy and my emotions, and that the deeply personal things about me are something that's earned. It's that I don't just give that stuff away for free anymore. If a person has that pattern of kind of long-standing, trustworthy behavior, we've developed a connection. I'm like, you know what? I'm starting to actually see this person for who they really are. You're not meeting the representative, like somebody had pointed out a while back, which I love. That first 90 days, especially, you're not, you don't know that person. Like you're meeting their highest and best self. And to realize that, like that's, you're seeing a person putting in like maximum effort. It's not who they really are. And getting to really know a person, you've got to see a person in a wide variety of situations to actually know them. It helps to see, how do they handle traffic? How do they handle being sick? How do they handle bad weather? How do they handle, being late to work? How do they handle if their children are misbehaving and have a meltdown in the store? How do they handle it, you know, when how are they with money? How are they with losing? That's a big one. You play a board game or you go bowling with them or whatever. How do they handle that if they lose? So all of those kinds of things kind of dictate, okay, does this person have appropriate behavior? And then realizing, okay, I'm not looking for a project. I'm looking for a partner. I'm not trying to change them. I just want to, trying to find like my people, right? Like we're all trying to find our people, and life is just so much easier when we can just be like, okay, this is just how this person is, and it either works for me or it doesn't. And if you want to bring up any issues you might have, it just falls into like, okay, well, what's workable behavior and what's deal breaker behavior, and how many times are you willing to bring things up before there gets to a point where you're like, okay, this is just deal breaker stuff, like we're not getting anywhere. Okay. Yeah, Sunny says they hate to lose at card games or board games. It's like children. And I think it's a really big thing, is how does a person handle losing? You can really tell a lot about a person by how they handle that. Do they start screaming and yelling and huffing and puffing and blaming you, especially if it's a team sport? I think bowling, you can learn a lot about a person by being on the same team with them in bowling. How competitive are they? Um, how do they handle losing? How do they treat other teammates? Just that kind of stuff. And is that what you're looking for? Are they playful? Are they relaxed? You know, so okay. So let's see. Let me scroll up here. People are talking about soulmates. Postmodern is saying she doesn't believe in the concept anymore. I'm not really sure that I do either. I kind of feel like everybody in many ways is our soulmate. I guess it depends on like what we consider a soulmate. Like, are we saying that a person is a soulmate because here's my definition of it. Okay. I think society's definition of soulmate is somebody that's our ultimate true love, right? Like this one other person out there that, somehow like we're separated at birth and there's this another perfect pairing to us. For me, my definition of a soulmate is more of there's multiple people in our life that help our soul to grow, help our soul to evolve, I guess. So in that sense, there's been a handful of people in my life that I feel have been in that way kind of a soulmate, that have been kind of that catalyst for massive amounts of growth. And unfortunately, I think about this all the time. I'm like, man, I really wish I could have personal growth in my life without all of the pain. But for me, I don't tend, it takes me 5 or 6 times to actually learn a lesson before doing something different. Unfortunately, I don't tend to learn by inspiration or clarity. I tend to learn by, I got to go around that mountain a few times. It's just, I would like to be less that way. It's just frustrating. Kelly says, just a friendly observation. Do you think you fielded or squiggled around the question about vulnerability? I'm very interested. I've listened on and off for a while. Vulnerability in 2017. Right. Okay. It's such a great question. I don't even really know how to answer that. I think for me, 2017, and I should do a video about this, was such a year of growth for me. I had such a really difficult time with all of this, with my blog, with my Facebook group, with my YouTube channel. And like I started all of this in 2000, like middle of 2015, 2016, I felt like I really freaked out. And in a lot of ways, I think in a lot of ways just kind of shut down. Like I was so overwhelmed with all of this, and I just did not handle that well. It was an awful, awful, stressful learning curve. And 2017, I think, was still a tremendous amount of growth, and getting into, I would say towards the tail end of 2017. So vulnerability, I think, is a big part of authenticity. So I would say, it's so difficult. Like at the time, during 2017, I probably would have rated myself really high. I would have said, yeah, I feel like I'm being very open and honest and sincere about things, about my life and about kind of what was going on. I wasn't very open about how I was not handling things, like my level of stress. And I think in large part it was because I didn't feel comfortable. I didn't want to like burden anybody with that, because I'm like, I chose to do all this. And so I kind of felt like I didn't have room to, I don't know. I just didn't want to bother anybody about that. So I was I think very out of tune with myself. I wasn't being honest with myself about how stressful things really were. And I would push through, and then I would basically like, I don't know. I was not handling things well. Like I would just get very overwhelmed and then be in bed for like a day, or I would leave my Facebook group for like, sometimes weeks, where I did not have the emotional energy to be in there. And it was a lot of like, the group stuff, like issues with members, admins having issues with other admins. And it was just a lot of like management stuff that was very overwhelmed. I don't like confrontation. So it was a lot. And I'm still trying to get better with all of that. So I guess in that sense, being vulnerable with letting other people know, like, hey, I'm having a really hard time with this. I need some help, or I'm learning. I'm trying to become what the group or the admins especially like need me to be. That was a very difficult conversation for me to have. And I think I was in denial a lot of it. I'm like, oh yeah, I can totally do that. I'll be fine. I was like committing myself to stuff right and left. And I kept thinking, oh, I'll be fine. I can handle it. And then I would not be fine. And then was not handling it. And so, okay, so I think in order for a person to be truly vulnerable, you have to be in tune enough with yourself to know what's going on in order to be vulnerable. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. And I was not in tune enough with myself to realize that things were off. So so if you were to have asked me like a year ago, was I being vulnerable at that time? I would have said yes, but I would have confused oversharing with being vulnerable. And I think those are two very different things. I hope that answers your question. That was a very long answer. That's why I apologize for that. Okay, let me scroll up here and cha 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 cha. Postmodern says, yeah, like I've said, I've thought a few men were my soulmate. I rejected two of them, got rejected by one of them, and there were probably others. Yeah, it was a very big realization for me when I began connecting the dots. And I think this is a common thing for most people that go through this. Okay. So from it just, and it's still so weird to me, like how I did not connect the dots earlier. Like I don't, to me, that fascinates me. Like the gaps in my thinking there of like, what was my thinking and what would have helped? Because I feel like if I can kind of crack that nut, then I can be more effective at helping other people that might be struggling in similar ways. But so my relationship with Jack was so extreme, and it was the tail end of it was like a Lifetime TV movie. It was so beyond anything that, so beyond a bad breakup, where I was just like, what on earth is going on? But I really felt like that was a hit and run. Okay, I came across a sociopath, 3% of the population, odds are it'll never happen again. And I really just chalked it up to a fluke thing. And then, a few years later, crashed into another guy very similar. And then I kind of realized, okay, this is now a pattern. So what's going on? What am I missing? And the more I really began to read about pathological kind of, personalities in general, especially, and even though it's weird because I knew this stuff, like I knew this as a psychiatric nurse, I had experience working as a domestic violence advocate, but it was just sort of like this information existed, but I wasn't connecting the dots and how it was all related. I don't know what my thinking was, but that's how it was very compartmentalized. And, so then when I realized, okay, there's a pattern here, and that kind of connecting those dots. And then like a later dot was realizing, well, wait a minute, you know what? I had a good friend in junior high and high school who I was, hands down in that cluster B. She was absolutely awful. And it was the same. Good times were really good. Bad times were really bad. I used to joke about that relationship being an abusive relationship because she was so demanding and controlling and jealous and possessive and just awful. And so then I began realizing, okay. And then it was just kind of like seeing my life at a distance and like, oh, wow. Okay. Actually, I've had quite a few problematic relationships in my life. So what's going on here? But again, the old me, I was only screening for like extremes, extreme physical abuse, extreme addictions, extreme, adultery or cheating. It wasn't even on my radar. Just I guess in my mind, everything else was like workable. Like, well, nobody's perfect, you know, and that the good times somehow justified the bad times. So it took me a while to really see that. But when I did, and then, you start digging into it, and then you start kind of looking at, and I didn't think that I had any issues with boundaries. I didn't think that I had any, and frankly, a lot of times, at least with Jack and Steve, I really don't even think that boundaries even came into play. If anything, I felt like I had healthy boundaries with them. It was my intuition that was off. Well, actually, my intuition was fantastic. I just didn't listen to it. And so, it's just, you piece it all together, and things start making a heck of a lot more sense. But I would encourage everybody to make a list of the most significant relationships in your life, whether they've been with coworkers, friendships, relationships, family members, and think about, okay, who did you have the kind of an abusive dynamic with? Or a dynamic that you might have thought to yourself, boy, this kind of seems like an abusive relationship. Or maybe that you've joked about, oh, this person's really controlling or difficult. And seeing if there's a pattern there. So that can be very eye-opening. Postmodern says, I do not trust people. Like I said, I'm focused on my child and my career and myself. I still have PTSD, even though I'm able to support myself financially. Yeah, and that's very normal that you don't trust people. But here's the thing. I don't trust people either. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with that, because I think trust is something that's earned. It's not given. And I get really upset with, like, quote unquote normal people who get upset that I don't, I'm not quick to trust people. And that's been one of the ongoing issues I've had with people that haven't got this stuff. Like, they just don't understand it. And I just get so irritated with it. But I'm okay with not trusting people, because I don't trust strangers, right? So I think it's important and healthy for us to have a healthy degree of skepticism when meeting somebody new, because they are a stranger. Even if we've chatted with them online for 3 weeks before meeting them in person, even if, we know them at work, I will tell you, it can be the added layer too. If you are in a mental health field, like I know some people are in the chat tonight, it's that extra level of questioning yourself, or even of letting your guard down. I mean, when I was working as a psychiatric nurse, obviously everybody that I worked with was either a therapist or a mental health clinician of some sort, like a mental health worker, a psychiatrist, psychologist, or social workers, or psychiatric nurses. And so I had issues with coworkers, but I would tell myself, like, oh, I'm reading too much into it. They can't be problematic. They're a therapist. Or they can't be problematic. They're a doctor, right? They're a psychiatrist. Like, there's no way that guy is being inappropriate with me. He's a married psychiatrist. Well, yes, he can be inappropriate, because just because a person's a psychiatrist or married doesn't mean that they have a solid moral compass, right? So but it can definitely make a person question. I don't know. It can make a person question things and think, oh, well, maybe I'm reading too much into this. I'm around this all the time. I'm around, you've got your kind of clinical hat on, where you find yourself kind of looking at other behaviors in your patients, and, you're charting it and you're making a note of it. And it's very easy to take that mindset outside of work. And then if you do start noticing things that nobody else notices, for other people just to second guess yourself and think, well, maybe I am being overly critical. Like, maybe I am reading too much, but really what I have found that, pretty much 10 out of 10 times is if you feel like something's off, something's off. Like you don't need to have a clinical background or training in abuse or, personality disorders or any of that to know that something's off. So, all right, let me. So, Postmodern says, I have enough interactions with people at work and church. I interact with people 6 days a week. Girl, I hear you. That's a lot of peopling. 6 days a week of peopling. And frankly, I think your priorities are on straight. It's, work and spending time with your child, and you're living your life and you're doing things that are important to you. That's the zone. And I get concerned because what's very common is people will often either kind of like obsessively start dating, thinking, okay, this was a fluke. I came across this total wackadoo. And now I'm in this big hurry, especially I think a lot of women between the ages of like 25 and 35. They're like, okay, I've got to hurry up and I've got to find somebody. And they're in this panic to meet somebody. And, biological clock is ticking and there's just all this pressure. And they're just going on date after date after date and tend to be crashing into the wrong kind of people over and over and over again. So that can be really, that can set a person's healing far back. It really can, because then they start to become bitter and jaded, and so people tend to either obsessively date or they tend to completely isolate. And either one of those extremes, the isolation, well, actually both of the things I understand, but like the isolation part, I get. And I would encourage anybody that is struggling with isolation to, it's okay. It's okay to want to be alone and like lick your wounds, but, it's okay. You don't need to wait until you're fully healed to get out there and start to enjoy life. And you can enjoy life in a safe way. I'm a big fan of meetup groups, meetup.com. There's lots of groups all over the world. And to participate in a way, if you're trying to meet new people and do new things, that can be a really great way to go. And you can get up and you can leave at any time. So just throwing that out there. Okay. Okay, hold on. I'm scrolling up here trying to catch up with the chat. Let's see. New Chris asks, so anyways, what has been working for you guys this past week? I will tell you one of the things, two of the aha moments that I've had this past week have been focused. Okay, so trying to focus on like, what am I doing? Like, what am I doing for 2018? And I have all these ideas, all these projects that I want to do. And so and in doing that, like I need to prioritize. And so part of that process has been for me to really think about how do I want to feel? How do I want to feel in 2018? Because 2017 was me, I think, being I was placing a lot of like should on myself. Like I should be doing this. I should be better at this. I should. And I was really pushing myself very hard to do a bunch of things to get out of my comfort zone in a lot of ways. And it was a very emotionally difficult year for me. 2018, I really want this to be about, okay, like what emotions do I want to experience in 2018? And then to try to, because it's never like when we set goals, it's never about the stuff or the thing, right? Like if I were to set the goal of, I really want to buy a house in 2018, which I would love that. I would love to have my own space. But it's not even so much the house that I want, it's the feeling that I think having a house will give me. So a sense of my own space, the ability, just kind of freedom, security, I think, in a way, feeling like more of an adult. Or if I want to publish a book, okay, do I want to publish the book or am I trying to get the information out there? And if the goal is to try to get the information out there, there's multiple, I mean, not that I'm saying that I don't want to publish more books, because I do, but I don't want to feel like that year is a failure if I don't get X number of things done, I guess is what I'm saying. Right. So, and I see a lot of people in different groups that I'm in. I have this one writers group that I'm in, and a lot of people will set different like monetary goals, like, oh, my goal this year is, they want to make, I don't know, whatever, $50,000 a year from their writing, or 10,000 a year, or 500,000 a year, whatever it might be. But one thing I have really learned is it's like when it comes to money and stuff like that, it's not even about the money. It's the feeling that we think having that money would give us, like a sense of financial security, or a sense of freedom, or a sense of choice, or a sense of, options, or maybe status, right? Like, oh, if a person's really driven to make X number of dollars a year because they want a certain type of car, or they want a certain type of house, or whatever, then it might be like a lot of their, deeper insecurities talking. So for me, it's really been, okay, well, what do I want to feel in 2018? How can I kind of plan my goals around that? And then how can I start feeling that now? So one of my bigger goals is a sense of connection. And I want to focus on, I've been really jazzed about wanting to do a lot more cooking this year. So I'd like to have more, I say dinner parties, that sounds so formal, but like just, or everybody brings a dish, and, we're going to do brunch this weekend. So everybody brings a dish, and, just kind of a get together and spending time with friends, because I can very easily get very hyper fixated on projects to the point where it's not healthy. And then I'm not a good friend, because I get so focused on wanting to finish a book, or, what have you. And that's not cool. So that was a big realization of what emotions do I want to feel this year? And then the second one has been in realizing that, like focusing on, asking myself, like, am I doing this because what am I doing with like people pleasing and needing approval? And I guess just being more assertive, and learning to say no, and getting more honest with, it starts with myself. It's not even that I'm, like intentionally misleading other people. I need to be honest with myself. So I guess being more honest with myself, and what's going on with me. When is something too much? If I'm saying yes when I mean no, if, and tuning in, like if I need a break, if I need to, whatever I might need, to be at least honest with myself, to be able to do that, So those are some aha moments from this past week. And I hopefully will have the print version of my book, my first book, by, I'm hoping by next week. The formatter is still working on it. The second book is up, paperback is up. I ordered it off of Amazon the other day. It was supposed to be here today, but I guess I'm hoping it'll be here by tomorrow. So we'll see how that looks. That's going to be so exciting. Yes, potluck. Yes. Healthy Love says, yep, potluck is when people bring a dish to the party. That's the way to do it. Let me just tell you. We used to do these meal shares. It was me, there was a group of us, and it was great. So sometimes we would have a theme, like Indian food, and everybody would just kind of be like, okay, sign me up for like saag paneer, or sign me up for tikka masala, or whatever. And then everybody would bring like a related dish. Enough It was enough for, what was it, 7 people, because there are 7 of us, 7 people, seven, how was it? It was enough food for like a week is what it boiled down to. So I think it was 7 servings for 7 people. And then you had all your meals done. So everybody was just responsible for that one meal. We would show up at my friend's house, and then everybody would dish it out, and it was great. Okay, let's see. Let me scroll up here. New Chris says, yeah, it's very insightful. Thanks for sharing, Dana. I'm getting started with all this self-knowledge is so hard. Yeah, it is. And I think too, the other challenge with all that is realizing that it's a process, and it's a lot of trial and error, especially with boundary setting. And hindsight's always 2020. I think just being patient with yourself, realizing it's a process, you're learning something new, and it just, we're not going to learn all this overnight. And all we can do is just take the next step, and you'll keep having clarity as you move down the path. That's kind of how that works. And to be compassionate with yourself along the way. This stuff kicks up a lot of stuff, because the more in alignment we get with ourselves. Maria had brought this up a while back. There's definitely a very real time where we feel there's this sadness of, oh my God, my life would have been so different had I known this, years ago. And there's this period of grief where we have to kind of mourn the loss of what was. But again, I will tell you, I think it's very easy to think that everybody else has this figured out, and that somehow we don't. I will tell you, I really don't think that the vast majority of people out there have this stuff figured out. I really, really don't. I don't think it's just like a codependent thing. I think this is a people thing, because this stuff is not taught and it's not discussed. And you will find that the more in alignment you get with yourself, and the healthier, when you have that open, honest, sincere, solutions-oriented communication, not a lot of people have that. And it freaks a lot of other people out, because they're so used to not being honest with themselves over like little things, so they don't know how to handle that. It's just weird. I think the more in alignment you get, the healthier you get. The kind of, in many ways, kind of the smaller like your inner circles become, because you're living a life that you love, and you realize you're like, I do not want chaos and drama and strife and struggle and just, confusion and crazy making in my inner circles. Like, I just want peace in my life, and I want to enjoy my life. And you really guard it with the fierceness that it deserves. It's part of valuing yourself. So, but it does take practice. I'm continually blown away like by the things that I learn about myself, where I'm like, I cannot believe I've been doing this for years. I can't even think of an example right now, but like, Oh, well, no, actually I can. Um, God, actually, I think quite a few examples, but like saying yes when I really meant no. And not realizing how out of tune I was, how dishonest I was being with myself, with my emotions. But I wouldn't even, that sounds even harsher than it wasn't even, I wasn't tuned in to even pick up on them in that way. So it wasn't even that I was like trying to suppress them. It was just, they weren't even on my radar. And so now, and again, because I always learn things the hard way, apparently, it took me quite a few times. I mean, it took me gaining like 20 pounds. It took me, struggling with some like major depression. It took some like extreme circumstances for this stuff to register of, hey, things are really out of alignment. You've got to get things back. If the thing is, I don't think they were ever in alignment. I think it was kind of this, things were out of alignment just enough to not be on my radar, was what it was. So now that I know different, I can start doing different. But when you have this realization of, oh my gosh, how could I not have noticed that? Like, that's so obvious to me now, and then there's just this, it makes me sad. Like, I look back and I'm like, oh my gosh, poor Dana, poor Dana, that she was going through all of that for a year, and that I didn't, um, like, I just wasn't aware of it. It makes me sad. Makes me sad for old me. Poor old Dana. Poor old Dana. That sounds so funny. Okay, let's see. Nina Goth says, I think the topic of narcissistic abuse is already out there. I was shocked to find terms like narcissistic injury, emotional abuse, gaslighting, etc. in Orange is the New Black, for example. Yeah, this conversation is really out there. It's it's going to be interesting to see kind of where all this goes in the next few years, for sure. MZ Whimsyful says, I relate to that, Dana. I've been having the same realizations to keep checking with what I want from things. Yeah. So okay. So one of the questions in this book, Codependency for Dummies, is she's talking about, like I said, this book is full of, there's all these exercises in there that are fantastic. And one of them is really kind of getting in tune with yourself. Like, what do you want? What do you need? And she recommends, starting with your likes. And, like, my favorite color is blank. My favorite movie is blank. My favorite food is blank. Right. And I vividly remember multiple times filling out questions like that for like security questions for my bank or whatever, and feeling like I was having this like existential crisis because I didn't know. I'm like, I don't know. I like all colors, and I kind of like all movies, and I don't know. Like, I like a lot of different foods, and I didn't know. And that caused me so much anxiety of, like, do other people know these things about themselves and it's just me? Or like, I don't know. It like really, really threw me for a loop. And so that was another one of those weird little moments of, hey, there's something kind of off here. And so something else I've been working on over, 2017, 2018 has been having an opinion about things. I think I was so go with the flow for so long for a wide variety of reasons that I really kind of lost myself. And so, taking the time to really think about, okay, yeah, okay, my favorite food, I would say, is probably Indian food. I love it so much. My favorite dessert is probably apple pie and vanilla ice cream. you know what I mean? Like getting really clear with this is what I like and this is why. That's a big way that we can start really tuning into this stuff, because I think it's really difficult to build on wants and needs if some of the basic stuff isn't there. And of course, this stuff can change, right? Like, it doesn't have to be set in stone, but I think it's a good idea of who are you and what are you about, and what are your likes and what are your dislikes. Like for example, for me, I don't like horror movies. Like I really don't like horror movies. So that would be something. So asking yourself, okay, well, what kind of movies do you like? What kind of movies do you dislike? Because oftentimes I think maybe a lot of people were more in tune with what we don't like than what we do like. So I remember looking around at houses a few years ago, and again, having a lot of anxiety because I was like, I don't know. Like, I really don't know. But the reality is I did know. I had just like gotten so used to just not having an opinion about things, again, for a wide variety of reasons, that I was very out of tune with what I really wanted. Now I know. I'm like, you know what? I'm not a fan of walls. I really would like a house that has a fairly open floor plan. And I like high ceilings, and I like lots of windows. And those are kind of the basics of things. A fireplace would be very nice. Things that all of that makes my heart smile. If I had a magic wand and money was no option, a house on the water somewhere, So going through this book has been very eye-opening. Yes. And Lilith says, you also like certain pens. I sure do. My gel pens, my Pilot pens. That was a big thing for me to realize. Yes, I love these so much. And that was another thing that I really like that has been new in my life that I totally felt like Beyonce was. I ordered off of Amazon. I got an Amazon gift card for Christmas, and I ordered these velvet hangers. That's like, but, and that like they're thin, but they're so like so tops like this that have kind of this big neck, because they fall off the hanger, and it makes me so crazy every single time I hang up clothes. So they were like $25 for 50 of them. 50 was not that much money. Total game changer. I feel so luxurious every time I go to take. I feel like Beyonce. I do. So, just that's my moment. I love it. Sable says, plugs her Pilot pens. Yes. Working deep undercover for the Pilot pen factory. But I do love these pens so much. That's a good point. Tammy says, I think all nurses have a favorite pen. I think you're absolutely right, because I know I did. And I had no shortage of these pens and guarded them with my life. Let's see. Oh, all that Kaz says, oh yes, a house on the water with chickens and llamas and some cute little goats and a beautiful, bountiful vegetable garden. That would be paradise. I would be all about that. So fun. AJ says, I love smelly candles, long hot bubble baths, playing my guitar and painting, but most of all, hugging my boys and making sure they know that their mommy loves them. Oh, I love that. That's awesome. Yeah, and to like the whole concept of self-care. Oh, there's just so much to all of this. Like just it's like pulling a string on a sweater. This was another aha moment for me. Is for years people would say, like, your comment about bubble baths brought it to my mind. I'm like one of the rare girls, I guess, out there. I do not like baths. I get antsy. Like, I just sitting there. Like, I don't, it kind of gives me anxiety just sitting there. I can't read a book because then the pages get all wet. Should not be trusted with technology within 50 feet of water. Like I don't, so I have a hard time just sitting there. But I used to think like self-care wise, people would always talk about taking a bath. And so I would do that because I was like, okay, this is what people do. People relax, they take a bath. And I didn't enjoy it at all. And so it's weird because like now, like, old Dana would do that. New Dana doesn't do that. Like I now know, okay, these are certain things that I enjoy doing. Like certain things for me with having to do with self-care might be, giving myself a pedicure or um, going and playing with some animals or taking time to just get lost in a good book or taking time to go get lost. One of my favorite YouTube channels is called Cinema Sins, going and watching a bunch of cinema sins or, um, spending time with friends or, yeah, those are probably some of like the top things. Scented candles, I'm a big fan of those. So self-care is such an individual thing, but I think when people first start out doing all of this, if we're so out of tune with ourselves, we're like, I don't know, I guess I'm supposed to go journal, or I'm supposed to go take a bubble bath, or I'm supposed to go whatever for a walk. But like if we hate all of those things, or any one of those things, then it kind of defeats the purpose. Little Miss says, I binge watch Netflix. Yes, I do too. Adi says, I don't like baths either. Water gets cold, then you're just sitting there in your cold, used water. I like puzzles. Yeah, that's my thing with bathtubs too, is then it freaks me out because I'm like marinating in my own filth. Like it just, ugh. I don't know. I hope I didn't just ruin bath time for other people, but yeah, puzzles. Yeah, puzzles don't do much for me. I have some friends that are really into them. I don't know. My brain really does not work that way. Okay, let me scroll up here. Oh my gosh, I never even thought to look for that. Amber says, I'm loving the YouTube channels where they blow glass. I never knew I liked that. It's fascinating. I never even thought to look for that. I'll have to go check out some of those channels out. There's also there is, I'm sure there's probably quite a few now, but there's one guy who does abstract paintings on YouTube, and he'll walk you through like start to finish, and he'll explain like why he does what he does, and he's just very talented, and it's super interesting. Or I'm trying to think of some other channels. Oh, another kind of obscure channel, if you guys haven't seen this guy, to me this is like super relaxing, is a channel called Primitive Technology. And it's this guy, I think he's in New Zealand, and he makes all of this stuff from scratch, like, primitive technology. And he'll dig up mud and make clay tiles, and builds a kiln out in the middle of nowhere, and fires all of this stuff and kind of creates these little structures. And it's just, I could watch that guy for hours. It's so relaxing, and it's just the nature sounds. He doesn't talk at all the whole video, and each video is him doing some project. It's just, people are just so interesting. So, yeah. Yeah, you're right. Cherise says, I mentioned that here before, but ASMR videos on YouTube are awesome. Very soothing. Yeah, they're very different. One channel, some channels, I don't even paint my nails. But one channel that I really enjoy is, well, there's what is it? Naio nails. And then there's this other gal, she's young, hot pink zebra nails or something like that. And she does the hot pink gal, she does the most creative stuff with nails. And I would never get this done in a million years. I can't even imagine sitting still for that long. I would be climbing the walls. But like, she does these crazy things where she'll do like an apple pie on a person's nail, like it's 3D. And then she'll have it where there's like a piece that comes out, but there's like a string attached and a magnet, and like it's super involved. I don't know. It just is so far away from like anything I would ever do that it's just fascinating. Lilith says, I'm having a hard time journaling. One of the things, I used to be the same way. And in some of the times, people can get hung up on journaling. Here's one thing I noticed about myself, okay, is if I had a really fancy journal, something that somebody would give me as a gift, or I would go buy at like a Barnes and Noble or whatever, I had all of this kind of pressure to make sure that I wrote neatly, and that I wrote kind of, deep thoughts. Like I felt this pressure. I'm like, I must, be a journalist, and I must journal in this journal. And I was very serious about it. And I kind of put all this pressure on myself. And I realized that it's easier for me to journal if I write in either like a cheap steno book, like, something like this, or if I type on a Word document. So that helped to take the pressure. But some people are the exact opposite. Some people are like, they really like making that whole experience of journaling, getting a very nice journal and making it just kind of this luxurious experience where they're alone with their thoughts. So it's kind of whatever works for you. So that's something to think about. How do you feel? How do you feel about the journal that you're writing in? And is that part of it? And another thing that people tend to struggle with is they don't know what to write when they journal. And so there's all different types of like writing prompts out there. One of the things that had really helped me was, there's this concept out there called morning pages, where you're technically the concept is that you take about 3 full pages of, like a school, like 8.5 by 12 size steno book, and you write for 3 pages, no more, no less. And it's really designed to allow your brain to kind of just get going, and without judging and it's free writing. So you would start off writing something like, boy, I had this really crazy dream last night. And maybe you start writing about that, and you're like, man, I could really go for another cup of coffee. And, oh, I've got so much to do today. And I really hope my book gets here in the mail. And you're just kind of it's just stream of consciousness. But the cool thing is, after you do that for a little while, like, you just kind of become more in tune with your thoughts. And something that I do is I will go back, because I will find, like, as I'm writing, something will kind of like a flash of insight or of some sort, like an answer or an idea or something will happen. And then I will go back and I'll put like a star in the margin. Or if I'm doing this, I journal more in like a Word document now, I'll go back and I'll highlight that passage, and I make it like turquoise. And so I can just scan through it every so often and remind myself of those ideas. So, and there's different types of journals out there. I'm working on creating a journal. I hope, I don't know when it's going to be out. I was hoping for the end of January, but I kind of don't think that'll happen. Probably middle of February. And the journal that I'm working on is It has 2 questions every day, and it's a 5-year journal. So I'm excited about it. I think it'll be really cool. It's all designed around self-awareness. So it's a ton of questions. Like I said, every day there's a question for the day, and then there's also a space for you to write like a notable moment from that day. And it's very brief. It's only, what is it? I think each question you get 2 lines. So when I first came across journals like that, I didn't like them at all because I was so used to doing my morning pages, which is like, 3 pages of stuff. But then I found that I like doing like the 5-minute journals or these shorter journals for different reasons, especially if there's like a writing prompt, if there's like a question of the day. So for example, one of the questions might be something like, um, what are you grateful for today and why? Might be one of the questions. And so it's kind of fun because as you go through the book, you answer the question, but then you come around to it 4 more times because it's a 5-year journal. So you're answering the same question on January 17th for the next 5 years. So it's kind of fun to see how your thinking changes over that 5-year span of time. And it's only a few lines. What I have found is that forcing myself to only write a few lines every day has helped with my thinking to become more clear and concise. And it's also helped to not make journaling like this massive undertaking that's going to take like 45 minutes. It's just something where I can kind of jot down what was going on that day, and it takes less than 10 minutes. And it's fun. It's fun to go back and see. Okay, let's see. Let me scroll up here. This is lots of different conversations going on in the chat. New Chris says, yeah, journaling when you feel good is great, though. It trains your brain to focus on positive and helps to smooth out future bad things. Yeah. Like I said, I'm excited about this journal because it's completely geared towards self-awareness, and introspection, which, I'm all about. So some of the questions, maybe for next week, I'll dig up just like a handful of different questions so you guys can kind of have an idea of what I'm talking about here. But so like some of them are, like what is one thing that you would like to change about yourself and why? Or like what was the last boundary that you set and why? Or what, I'm trying to think of some of them. It took me forever to come up with 365 questions. It really did. So, oh my gosh. And I went through it. So, oh my gosh, I probably made that whole project significantly harder than it needed to be. Actually, I know that I did, because when I first started writing that book, I went through and I found 365 quotes from other people. And then I got all the way to the and so I found 365 like self-awareness type quotes. Then I went through and I spent so much time trying to craft like a good question that was an extension of that quote. And then I got all the way to the end of it. And then the gal who was proofreading my book, there was a few people that were concerned. They're like, I don't know about like using other people's quotes. And I think you need to ask them and get permission, and it could be an issue. And I was getting a lot of conflicting advice about it. And so I finally thought, what I think what I'm going to do is just not use other people's quotes and like, and maybe just come up with some of my own. And then I don't even know. It was just like this whole long process that just every book has its own struggles. So Maria asked, Dana, do you still check your Dear Dana email, or is it overflowing with messages? I have not checked it in a while, and I need to. It's overflowing. I think my main email, the Dana at Thrive After Abuse, is completely full because I had people messaging me in other ways saying that their emails are bouncing back to them. So I just get so many emails every single day in all these different inboxes. It's one of my things I would like to do, make it a priority in 2018, is to see about getting like an assistant of some kind to help. I don't even know what that would begin to look like, because all of those emails obviously are very sensitive. So and that's not something that I'm just comfortable, hiring a person off, that a total stranger to do. So I don't know. I don't know how that's all going to shake out, but no, I did not know that. That's so weird, Tammy. Tammy says, did you know that buying other people's journals on eBay is a thing? How? I guess I could totally see that. Like, it's kind of that weird, maybe fetish voyeurism kind of a thing. Yeah, I could totally see that. Hmm. Okay, let's scroll down here. Banaz is here. Welcome. Okay, let's see here. Scrolling. People are talking about pets and what to do with pets if you go no contact. And Kevin says, I'm struggling with a similar situation with my cat. Not many people talk about pets, but it's almost like leaving your children behind. I wish I knew how to handle it. Yeah, it's incredibly difficult. And that's a very real thing. I think a lot of people tend to stay in abusive relationships because of pets, and it's yeah, and and every situation is different. I think perhaps one of the potentially easier ways, if you have money, would be to offer to buy the pet from them. So, that's, I don't know. I'm such an animal lover, and I don't want to get anybody in trouble or encourage something, but uh, I guess if it was me, off the record, I would, if you're planning on leaving ahead of time, I would, and especially if you're planning on kind of going out of state, like disappearing, I would, as part of like my quote unquote safety plan, I think I would go put the animal with somebody that they didn't know and pretend like it ran away. And then I would disappear like a week or two later and go get the animal and then get the heck out of town. But if that's not doable, and if they're going to stay in town, you've got kids together and they're going to see you and stuff, I would make it seem like you're doing them a favor and just say, hey, I was thinking about it, like, and make it seem like it's no big deal for you, whatever. You're just trying to make things convenient. Be like, hey, I can totally take the cat. if you don't want it, I can totally take it. If they say no or whatever, if you can try to negotiate and just be like, hey, if I, how do you feel if I, give you $100 or whatever for the dog? Or, you know what I mean? Like sometimes you just, you just have to do stuff like that. And sometimes that doesn't work. And sometimes you just have to let the pet go. It can be absolutely heartbreaking. Okay. Spring Goodwater says, hee, I love baths, but my teenage son agrees with you, Dana. Yeah, they don't do anything for me. I know lots of people that just love them, but when I was in New Mexico, the animal part of all of this was a huge thing. A lot of people they had chickens, they had goats, they had horses, they had animals that weren't easily rehomed. Some domestic violence shelters have connections with like local animal shelters. So if a person's leaving and they have, well, I think it's worth a phone call for any type of animal that you have, but um, sometimes they do have connections to animal shelters, or there's people in the community that are open to taking animals of any size. So if a person's like, okay, I need to go to a shelter, but I don't want to leave my dog, if they can get the dog, then sometimes that dog can be, and sometimes too in shelter places might take animals, and sometimes there might be church groups or other groups that will pay to house that animal for 90 days or what have you, while a person can kind of get situated again. Okay, let's see here. Yeah, it's a good point. Truth Seeker says if you buy pets, record the transaction though. And Lilith is saying, the narcissist told me it was not fair to me or him to take them out of their home. Never mind that I fled my home. Yes. And I think it depends on the dynamic. If the abusive person is good to their pets, then I think that's one thing. If an abusive what I don't know what I would say even like the odds are, or this not even the odds, the kind of breakdown of how this goes down. But sometimes abusive people will, as an attempt to hold on to that power and control, they will, you know, they will abuse the children, they will abuse the pets, all as a way of getting back at the target. And so that can be very common, that they will go after things that are near and dear to the target. So I don't know, I'm of the mindset, especially when it comes to pets, it's a lot easier to kind of take off with pets than it is with children, unfortunately. But I'm more of the mindset of kind of beg for forgiveness instead of ask for permission, if you can, especially if you know that they're violent and they're gonna hurt the pet. But I don't know. It's a difficult situation, and Yeah. Narcissist free. Stana, how long did you remain single after your narcissists? So the first time with Jack, I started dating out. Seriously, it was like out of spite. I was not ready to date, like not even close. And I went on a few dates with a few different people within like a few months after that happened. And the only reason I didn't, I think, and I've shared the story before, like the one date, the first, probably I think it might have been even the first date. I had been like chatting with a few guys online. The first, I didn't realize I didn't realize like how much that had rocked my world until I went on this one date with this one guy, very nice guy. We were out at having a drink. It was at, I don't know, 10 o'clock at night. We were outside on this patio bar, and this cute young college girl, 22 years old, dressed all cute. She was going clubbing with her friends, comes over to me and asks me if I asked directions to this other place. I had no idea where the place was that they were going because it's been a long time since I've been out to clubs. So I was like, oh, I'm sorry. I don't know the place you're talking about. I hope you guys, have a great evening. But instantly my mind went to thinking, who is she? Does he know who she is? Was this a setup? Because Jack had been introducing me to all of these people that he'd been sleeping with since day one. And I didn't know that until like the very end. So it was just my paranoia and that hypervigilance and just all of it. And of course, this guy I'm on this date with thinks I'm nuts. He's like, what? What are you talking about? I've never seen that girl before in my life. And it was like that moment I just realized, oh my God, I don't know what's wrong with me, but I need to just bench myself. Like I'm a mess. And so then I took some time off. It was probably, I guess after that, it was probably about close to about a year, maybe 8 months or so. And that guy that I dated, um, I remember I was so scared of getting hurt. And this was another big lesson I learned in all of this was I was putting that on him. I was like, okay, I went through all of this. Like it was this awful situation. And, basically like, please just have good intentions towards me or just leave me alone. Like I can't handle being lied to. I can't handle like anything squirrely. Like basically, please just be kind and be gentle to me. And I don't, you know, and then I kind of realized, man, I don't know, a few months into that of like, okay, that's I'm giving another person like a lot of power. And that I needed, like he's going to act how he's going to act. And I couldn't, that wasn't probably the best plan to just hope that somebody else was not going to hurt me. Right? That like he was either going to earn my trust or he was not going to earn my trust. Either way, I would respond accordingly. And that was a big shift in my mindset of realizing, of taking that back and saying, you know what? Um, here's here's the deal. Like you're gonna do whatever you're gonna do, and like, and then I'll respond accordingly. And so, and again, that was another one of those, like my boundary, again, like back then, my radar was still set way too, that beam was set way too wide. And, or is that, no, it was set way too narrow. It wasn't set to scan for, um, you know, more of the subtle stuff, the crazy making. There was a lot of crazy making in that relationship because I'm pretty sure he was cheating on me. So, but I don't know. So we dated for probably about a year and a half or so. And then I started dating Steve after that. And we all know how that went. So it's been a huge learning curve with boundaries and standards and getting out sooner than later and getting over the fear of, well, but what if I miss out on a good person because because I have healthy boundaries and standards, right? It gets insane when you say it out loud. But old me used to think, but what if my boundaries and standards are too high and like, there is no perfect person. And so what if I'm, like fortressing, like keeping people out? But the new me realizes that if I really have to settle, if settling involves, perpetual confusion, crazy making, controlling, condescending, uh, that kind of behavior, then I'd rather be alone. I don't want to ever get comfortable with that again. So after Steve, I dated a little bit here and there. And the struggle I really had, I think, with those relationships, is many of them felt very flat. And I wasn't aware that I had PTSD at that time. I wasn't aware of what had happened. I was still very much in like the connecting the dots period. And um, I just, I felt profoundly changed, but I didn't know how or why. I just, it was just a very confusing time. So it's taken me a while to kind of get past that and to kind of, and I think to the struggle with that was I realized that, you hear a lot of people talk about, oh, you need to not be attracted to like bad boys or whatever. I've never been attracted to bad boys ever. And so I was confused because I'm like, I'm not attracted to that at all. I don't like drama. I don't like chaos. Even the relationships I had with sociopaths weren't full of drama and chaos. They were at the tail end. They were normally fantastic, amazing, wonderful relationships, but they had this whole double life stuff going on at the same time. So, and not to say that I haven't had, crazy making dynamics with friends and, men before. I have. But that was, I think, what was really tripping me up, because I'm like, these two relationships, I would have said, and I think many other people would have said, seemed incredibly healthy. So I didn't like, what am I supposed to stay away from? Because I don't know what I'm missing here, you know? So that was very confusing for a long time. But the aha moment, what I came to realize with that was the commonalities with them was the love bombing and the whirlwind, and they were both very intense, and they both came across as very emotionally, not even emotionally, just immature. And that was the stuff that I was glossing over. And so nowadays I just go a lot slower, and I don't get, I try really hard. And for me, it's still very much a conscious effort. I have to step out of that whirlwind, because have found that, you know, um, the problematic people in my life, if and when they do come in, and, like there's a lot of intensity there, and it's just, like, it's that soulmate kind of connection, and then I hop in, I get sucked into it. I willingly hop into it. And so it's one of those things that I have to learn now to slow things way down and to be okay with that, and not feel like, I used to feel like if I slowed things way down, I'm like, oh, I would get so bummed out. I'm like, oh man, I wish I could just, jump into a whirlwind like I used to. I wish I could trust like that. I wish I could, throw myself into love with like reckless abandon. And Dana today realizes none of that was ever healthy before. And I don't need to mourn the law. I don't need to mourn. There's nothing to mourn. Like, it's not that I am damaged goods because of what I went through. I'm awakened in many ways. Mo asks, "Hey Dana, to what extent was the sexual side taking part in the love bombing?" Uh, well, here's the thing, because I had it's very similar behaviors in friends and in romantic relationships. So, romantic relationships. Oh gosh, I in here. Okay, romantic relationships. I was all about moving very fast, and I didn't see that as problematic at the time. I saw that as I'm an empowered woman. I'm in control of my sexuality. You know, if I just want to sleep with a guy right away, then you know, I just saw it as kind of almost like, yeah, like just being like this kind of empowered modern day woman. And I hope that doesn't stir things up when I say that, but I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with it. I'm not saying that there's anything right with it, but me today realizes, you know, I value my time and energy and emotions. And part of that is going slow and just realizing that, man, like, I don't want to bring strangers into my house. I don't want to hop into bed with somebody. I don't want to develop feelings for somebody that might not be there otherwise. Sex confuses things. We all A lot of people think that it doesn't. It does. It does, especially for women. Like, our bodies release a lot of oxytocin. Men's don't. With sex, women's body, we release a lot of oxytocin. Men tend to only release oxytocin when they have sex with somebody that they love. Women, we release it all the time. So whenever we have sex. So, like, subtle differences like that, I'm very different now about intimacy than I was back then. But the love bombing, the kind of the rushing of intimacy, there's a whole like kind of friend version of that. So the problematic people that I've had in my life as friends, it's been it's been the kind of platonic version of that. So love bombing, it was that feeling of, oh man, this person is, we just have so much in common. And um you know like um we just hit it off amazingly, like right away. And they wanted to spend all their time with me. I wanted to spend all my time with them. And we were just inseparable. I mean, this gal that I was friends with in junior high and high school, we were inseparable. My mom especially, was like, you guys spend way too much time together. You need to just slow things down. Like, you guys are going to burn out. You're going to quit being friends. But I just really, when the good times were good, and they were good, you know, probably 70% of the time, 75, maybe even 80. I really enjoyed our company. We had a blast. We did everything together. Like, we just really got along famously. But when things were really bad, she was psycho. And then things would get like really, really bad. But so it was the same dynamic. It was just like I said, the friendship version of that. So nowadays, I just have slowed everything way down. I realize, it takes a while to really see a person clearly. Um, and I don't tolerate being treated like that anymore. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if, like, how long I've been friends with them. It doesn't matter. Um, somebody treats me, if somebody acts like they hate me for no reason, and they treat me with contempt, disdain, or hostility out of the clear blue because I've set a boundary with them, or, disagreed with them or something like that, like, no, then we're done. Like, there's no, like, it's not workable for me. Nancy says, yes, the love bombing is the worst part of it all. It sets us up for failure. Yeah. And, it's just nobody's thinking clearly. And part of this, with normal dating is there is this idealized stage with any relationship. So, it is very normal to be like, this person is so perfect for me. They're so amazing. They can do no wrong. And I think it's important that we need to realize that everybody, if there's that chemistry there, it's the whole saying, love is blind. It's because there's this rushing gush of hormones that's just, you know, our brain is being soaked in, and we're not seeing the situation clearly. And obviously, right, if we're describing another person as perfect, then that's a really great sign that we're not seeing the situation clearly, because nobody is perfect. So if we think that another person is perfect, it's because we're not seeing them clearly, and we don't know them well enough. There will be things about that person, right, that get to you. It's whether or not, kind of where on that spectrum are the things that get to you, you know? And that just takes time. So the difference is, with with an abusive relationship of any kind, it tends to run that pattern of idealize, devalue, discard. So what happens is, the narcissist sees a person and they're like, they idealize them, just like we might be idealizing them. We feel like, oh my God, we've met our soulmate. They're so amazing. They're so perfect. This is, this really great person. There's that heavy idealization on both ends, right? And then when that wears off, which happens about 3 to 6 months in, they tend to go into devalue mode. And that's when they start seeing that the partner clearly. And they're like, whoa, wait a minute. Like, all of a sudden, oh, we don't agree on politics, or we don't agree, I don't like the foods that you eat. And so when that other person starts expressing their individuality and they start seeing that clearly, narcissists oftentimes don't like that. It's just all about them all of the time. And it's just this very childlike view of other people and of the world. And that's when that grinding down starts happening. So if you are acting in a way that's outside of what they think that you should be like, whatever, and that's the thing, like, you can't, there's not enough that could be ground off of you to fit this perfect mold of that person, because odds are that perfect mold of that person is going to be continually changing as their thoughts about a perfect partner continually changes, so there is no winning that game. Like, it's a path to hell is what it is. But so they start devaluing their partner, and it's just that constant, like, controlling, criticizing. It's that grinding down. If you're really dealing with somebody that's more on like the psychopathic end of the spectrum, it's a lot of, gaslighting. It's when the games really start to kick up. So it's malicious, and the intent is to really destroy that other person. Evil. It's just evil. It really is. It really, really is. And so then the devalue happens, and then the discard tends to happen, or they up and leave that partner, generally for somebody else. But it could also be a series of like discards designed to punish the partner for not getting ground down, for not fitting into the box that they want them to fit into. So that's when you see a lot of like silent treatment, ghosting, kind of these just erratic, their behavior. It's really like, it's erratic, dramatic, and emotional to an extreme. And it feels perpetually confusing and crazy making, and it causes a tremendous amount of introspection, wondering, is it me? Is it them? What's going on? And it causes a person, makes them feel like anxious and unhinged and needy. And if they don't know what's going on, it makes them feel that way. Once you've kind of been through this a few times, maybe hopefully just once, and you're aware of it, then you're like, you start seeing those games start to pop up, and you're like, oh, hell no, like I'm out of here. And you just realize there's nothing there for me. Like there was, I, got hooked into this game, and now that I see it for what it is, like I just walk away, just another, child in an adult body playing some evil games. JJ says, I think some of us need to give ourselves our own compassionate parenting, not self-deprecation, but use the parent/adult within us to nurture our child within us because we never had it. Yes, absolutely. And this book that we're reading, the Codependency for Dummies, talks a lot about that. It's fantastic. And that's a really great way too, I think, to work on our self-talk. And I think even actually, let me back that up a little bit more to speak on what you're talking about, to even identifying that voice of the, when that voice, that critical parent voice kicks up within us, where we're telling ourselves, oh, you should do this, or I can't believe you did that. And oh, you need to, no, nag, nag, nag. And to pay attention to when that voice comes up, and then to try to kind of replace it with something that's more, like you're saying, compassionate parenting instead of critical parenting, compassionate parenting. So it's interesting when we can start getting some distance and watching our thoughts as they surface. And then it's even cooler when we can start replacing that with more positive thoughts. Cha-cha-cha. New Chris says, Dana, have you read the book Healing Hidden Abuse by Shannon Thomas? I have not, but I'm writing it down. Healing. I will check it out. I think we still need some books for our book club. And I don't think we've read anything by her. Okay, let's see. Banaz says, how is it that sometimes the people who we have reactions to are so calm and collected while we are feeling so triggered? I feel like I become like a crazy cat going after my own tail and getting nowhere. Well, there might be a couple of different things going on. I think for starters, everybody gets triggered by different things. So, that's a big part of it. And then also the other component might be is if the other person is trying to provoke an emotion in us. So if they're trying to provoke an emotion in in us, then that if it's all part of kind of their game, right? Like I'm going to, kind of push buttons until this person reacts and explodes. And then they're going to be like, then they're going to act shocked and surprised, and then spin it around and be like, oh my goodness, you're so out of control, right? You're so abusive. You're so manipulative. You're so emotional. That's a very common abuser technique. But if it's not normally an abusive person, like if it's a total stranger, for example, right, that doesn't know you, that doesn't know where your buttons are, that's totally appropriate conversation and kind of just hits a nerve with you, and they're totally cool, calm, and collected, it might just simply be that they crossed a line that they didn't, mean to cross. Here's an example we were talking about the other day in the support group. So, I miscarried a couple years ago, and I did not realize how much like unresolved stuff I had around that. And it wasn't until I began working this job where I had a lot of coworkers who were there was like a period there. We were having baby showers probably. I mean, it felt like it was like once every 3 months. I mean, we were having a lot. I mean, I had a lot of coworkers and we had a lot, everybody was kind of the same age, but, and I was not aware of triggers in myself at that time at all. And so the first time, they were like, "Hey, baby shower for so and so." And I was like, "Oh, that's awesome." And again, this just speaks to how out of tune I was with my own emotions. And so then I went to the store and like, bought her a gift and like, I don't know, brought I forget what, like a fruit tray or whatever to the baby shower thing. And I stayed for about it wasn't very long, 5 or 10 minutes. And then finally, and I felt awful, but I got up and I went to my office and just cried. And I didn't realize that that was such a trigger for me. And then I realized, okay, I need to do something different. So, um, then kind of the next time around, it was like, okay, um, I will, and I forget, I kept bumping it, like distancing myself. So then the next time around, it was like, okay, I'll do a gift and I'll drop off, like a lunch tray or whatever in the room. And then I'll just, leave. And I think probably I'd make up stories like, oh, I have a doctor's appointment. Because again, I wasn't comfortable with the truth. And not to say that people needed to like know all of that about me, but like just to say, you know what, it's too much for me, or I wish I could be here to celebrate, but today it's just not a good time. Something. I mean, you can still be honest without oversharing, right? So, um, and then I realized, okay, no, it's too much for me to even go buy a gift. Like I don't even want to go pick out baby stuff. And so then it was, okay, I can do a gift card and I can do like a fruit tray and that's it. And I did that for a while. And then it really got to the point where I finally told my boss what was going on. And I said, it's just too much for me. And so I got to the point where I was like taking half days. I would just leave for the rest of the day. And I felt terrible. I mean, I felt like a horrible person that I could not celebrate, that I had trouble being happy for somebody else. But that was just where I was emotionally. So like they didn't mean to trigger me, right? But it was a triggering thing. And all any of us can do is you know, we only have control over ourselves. So totally. Maria says, yes, I didn't use the word trigger, but I felt uncomfortable. And I turned myself inside out and wrestled myself out of being uncomfortable when I needed to listen to that feeling and move away. Yeah. Yeah. That's been a very big thing, is just honoring that, honoring that feeling. And I think too, in realizing, we don't have to justify, like we don't have to explain that kind of stuff to anything really to other people. If you're having some sort of difficulty in some way, maybe that's not that extreme as, having a miscarriage or something, but if you're having a really difficult time, let's say, for example, you've got court that day and you're already feeling very kind of like in a state of like hyper arousal, right? It's already probably going to be a difficult day for you. And um, maybe your coworkers know about it. Maybe they ask you about it when you get back and you really don't want to talk about it. And you're finding yourself very irritable and very angry and very defensive. And like, you just want to cry and those kinds of things, to try to anticipate as much as you can for those times that are going to be extra emotional for you. So if, going to court or, um, having to move, or maybe holidays, these kinds of things, and figuring out, okay, what do I need to do to make this as, to keep as much peace as I can in my life, during this and be as good as I can to myself. That whole compassionate parenting that we were talking about earlier. What would be the most compassionate thing that I could do for myself in this situation? Judgment aside, right? Because our critical parent voice is like, well, but you should be able to do this, and you're an adult and you can't take off a day. You know what I mean? Like that no, voice kicks in, but just to be like, okay, no judgment, compassion. Like what would you like to be able to do? And maybe that is take half a day off of work, or maybe that is to go, close the door to your office during lunch and turn on some relaxing music or whatever. Just be extra good to yourself. Thank you, Malta, for the live stream donation. Says our support community as a whole is wonderful. Thank you, Dana, for all that you do, and also to our fellow survivors who offer us compassion, understanding, and help to find our direction. Thank you so much. That is so beautifully said. And yeah, I agree. I thank you so much for everybody that's in the chat and for you guys that, support each other. And it's just all of it. It's just so cool. The internet is so wonderful and makes my heart smile seeing everybody come together and working together like this. Really, Trisha. Hello. Trisha says, this is the first time I've joined the live chat after a long time of watching. Well, welcome. Bob, great question. Says Dana, does being with a narcissist cause us to become codependent? If so, do you recommend Al-Anon for treatment? That's kind of a big question. Generally speaking, what happens is a relationship with a narcissist. Generally, codependency is more understood as something that is developed in childhood. That it's kind of how a person interacts with the world. So they've maybe learned at a young age that in order to so like we're all here, right? We're all kind of born into this world, and we all need to have our needs met. And you have your physical needs and your emotional needs and your kind of your self-esteem needs. And I refer to all of these different needs as buckets. Like we come into this life with all of these different buckets, and we need to get these buckets filled. And generally our primary caregivers, like our parents, are the ones that work towards filling those buckets, like food, clothing, shelter, emotion, love, attention, affection, a sense of importance, a sense of significance. And then as we get older, those needs get more complex, like a sense of meaning, a sense of purpose, kind of the Maslow's whole hierarchy of needs, right? So we're becoming you really grow into yourself as an individual, like who is Bob? What is Bob here? What are Bob's gifts to give to the world, right? So it's kind of figuring out who you are and what your life is about, and then living that authentic life. So and this so difficult. So when a person gets tangled up with a narcissist or an emotional manipulator or an addict or an alcoholic, they're normally, if they've been with this person generally for any length of time, really, I think that kind of what I remember reading a long time ago was, if this addict, alcoholic, or abusive person has been this way for longer than 3 years and has had this persistent problematic behavior, mainly we're talking like addiction or alcoholism. If it's been really bad for, kind of this length of time, and generally like less than that, but 3 years without them being in treatment or what have you, then the spouse at that time would have been considered to have some major codependency issues. But I think that's a very oversimplification of things, because it really doesn't speak to the level and the subtleness of a manipulation that occurs with addiction and with abuse. And I don't think that it's just something, because healthy boundaries and all of this stuff it's really not taught. Like, I just don't buy that other people don't have these issues. I think more often than not, what happens is they just haven't been emotionally invested in like addicts, alcoholics, or abusive people, because nobody thinks that they would get involved with these situations, until it happens to them. So, uh, a person has to be really grounded within themselves to not get knocked off balance by these kinds of relationships. And so, but here's the thing. After a relationship with an emotional manipulator, a person is going to have, their boundaries, if they were ever healthy to begin with, which they probably were not because we're raised in a really dysfunctional culture, their boundaries have probably been greatly eroded over that time that they were with this incredibly dysfunctional person. So it's a really good idea for a person to go back and examine what go back and examine your boundaries and your standards, and to kind of figure out, okay, what kind of I don't know, like, messages did I have about love and commitment? Because a lot of this stuff is so ingrained. I mean, a lot of people walk around thinking commitment is forever. And this kind of stuff is not touted as dysfunctional. It's sold as this is really healthy, and this is what you do if you're a certain religion, or so a lot of people have these ideas about what love is, what family is, what commitment is, what friendship is, that's deeply dysfunctional, and they don't even realize it. They don't even realize it. So my second book, Out of the Fog, which you can find on Amazon, if you just look up Dana Morningstar, is what I call a lot of quote unquote thought holes. So it's the differences between, okay, like, what is a codependent dynamic, and what is the difference between codependency and commitment? What is the difference between, a parent and a predator? What is the difference between, insincere remorse and sincere remorse? So I really dive into kind of separating all of these different things out. What is the difference between love and love bombing, or love and a trauma bond? Because, these things aren't so black and white, especially when you're in the thick of it. It can be very difficult to figure out, well, especially if you're around a bunch of other people that are telling you all kinds of garbage, like, oh, well, nobody's perfect, and you've got to forgive and forget, because, family is forever, and, blah, blah, blah. All of these things, you got to treat them how you want to be treated. And those kinds of messages, when abuse is in the equation, or addiction for that matter is in the equation, it can, in a person's already being manipulated and they're already confused, messages like that can make them stay in these, or lead them to stay in these really deeply dysfunctional dynamics, because like, if they're getting all this peer pressure of, well, you just need to work on things, or, well, your partner said that they were sorry and you need to really give them another chance. And if you're hearing that from, like, your minister, or from your therapist, or from, your mother or whatever, then it can be very confusing, where a person's like, God, this really, I feel like I'm really being mistreated. But if nobody's identifying it as abuse, it's just an added layer of the crazy making of it all. So Al-Anon can be, I think, great for, Al-Anon is all about boundaries. And it's very similar dynamic. It's helping the families of normally an addict, but it's the same type of dynamic. The manipulative, it's healthy boundaries is what it's all about. So I think those can be really fantastic meetings to go to. I think they also have nowadays online meetings, which is cool. But learning about healthy boundaries is a huge piece of the puzzle. Postmodern says, I'm allergic to psychopathy now. Yeah. I think once you see it for what it is, it really does lose the hold over a person. And you're just like, oh no, I'm done. Totally done. But yeah, these concepts, there can just be such subtle differences between the two, at least at first, right? And again, this is why I was like, I don't buy that most people see this for what it is, because here's another example. So one of them, some of the books that I am wanting to write in 2018 are children's books. And so the other day, and I've mentioned this book before, and I'm probably going to, I should just get it. I should just go buy it. I was going to go to the library, but it was checked out. Then I don't know, I should just go buy it because I'll use it multiple times. But the Shel Silverstein book, The Giving Tree. And it's, I was reading the reviews on it, and one lady gave it a 1 star. And she's like, this book is horrid. It's all about it sets a kid up for codependency big time. It's like you give and you give and you give and you give and you give until there's nothing left. And that's somehow taught to be love. And she says, I fear for humanity was her review on that. And it's interesting because most people, all the 5-star reviews, I love this book. It really teaches children the value of giving. And, all of this is so interesting to go through and like read the reviews on children's books that talk about topics of how to be a friend, how to, what is love, like how to, doing these things. And you're like, oh my God, like we're grooming kids for codependency. Although I will say the book, The Giving Tree, I think Shel Silverstein was a really smart dude. And I think that he left that book intentionally open, because if you go and you look at the pictures at the tail end, I think it's meant to be a book that's discussed. It wasn't meant to be like, this is a positive message about giving. So, but it's interesting how most people took it to be a positive message about giving, when to me, it's very clearly that it's not. And again, too, books like Twilight and 50 Shades of Grey are all about abusive relationships. And that is seen as healthy. And so like culture as a whole is all screwed up with what is seen as ideal. Maria says, I missed that. Does Dana love or hate the book, The Giving Tree? I both. I hate it in the sense that it is all about giving until a person has nothing left of themselves. But I love it in the sense that I think it's a fantastic teaching tool of healthy boundaries and when giving becomes a problem. So I guess I view that book probably very differently than all of the people that gave it 5 stars, because they tended to give it 5 stars because it's all about, if you really love somebody, like you're going to give until there's nothing left for you to give. And that's not love, right? Like that is codependency. And that's, love doesn't destroy, right? If we're having to destroy ourselves in order to keep somebody else whole, then there's a problem. But people that are solidly grounded in themselves do not last in relationships with emotional manipulators. But again, it's one of those things, like nobody thinks they get tangled up in stuff like this. The vast majority of people are not. The people out there that have really good boundaries, all of those lessons have most likely been very hard won. It's one thing to learn about boundaries and to even practice boundaries, but until they've really been tested, and until a person, I think you just have to go through something like this. I think I don't know if there's any way around it. I think getting healthy boundaries comes from the pain of having really unhealthy boundaries. That's a huge motivation to change, is when your life becomes so painful that you're like, I can't handle this anymore, that we start doing things different. And if a person's never had their boundaries really tested like that, then they don't really know how healthy they are. Right? Like nobody thinks that they would get into a cult or an abusive relationship or follow a crazed dictator until it happens. I mean, you look at Nazi Germany and how many people were following Hitler. It's the same dynamic. You have this really intense, crazed person heading all of this, and what he was able to, get people to, to kill Jewish people and handicapped people and all different types of people that he didn't like. And that's extreme. That's extreme behavior. So, it was all of Nazi Germany codependent? No. Did they all have, but they all had their boundaries like significantly eroded, but it all happens slowly over time, right? It starts off with, okay, we're going to do this one thing first. And then, okay, then we're going to, okay, guys, we need to have a curfew. And okay, we're going to do that. And then people are like, oh, that seems kind of weird, but okay. And it's this slow, gradual loss of like freedoms and rights. And then it's okay, now we're going to have you start wearing a yellow star. And then, okay, now we're going to seize some accounts. And of course, there's always a justification for it, right? But that's why it's so important that in times like politically or personally or what have you, that we realize that just because somebody has a justification for what they're doing doesn't make it right. And if the end result is that it's oppressing other people, then we really need to take a step back and figure out, because something's off. If we're exerting power and control over another person to where we're diminishing them, then there's something terribly wrong. So I don't know. It's kind of a long answer. Maria says, oh, Dana, I fully disagree. There are many people who grew up very healthy, which means they learn boundaries early on, so they don't have any long-term problematic people in their lives. I can't tell if you're joking or not. Yeah, I don't know. If you're serious, I don't know. Maybe, I don't know if you're serious or not. I can't tell. Okay, let's see here. Well, and that's the thing. New Chris is saying everyone except the Germans forgot that Hitler was elected. Yes, and that's the slippery slope, right? And Hitler did a lot of good things. That's how that all started. He was very progressive. The Volkswagen concept for the Volkswagen came out of World War II and Nazi Germany. The freeways, um, fantastic educational system. He was very much a go-getter, very progressive, did a lot of wonderful things for Germany. And that was part of his charisma and charm. And it's the whole thing. Like, people are rarely 100% evil, right? Or even 100% bad. There's still good things too. And so it's so easy. And so I would imagine during that time in Germany, people, we're kind of going through something similar here. Like, people focus on a lot of the good. Well, but, we didn't have all, these cars before. And it's a lot of sleight of hand stuff. The swastika was originally a symbol for peace. And then that was morphed into something evil. And there's a lot of propaganda, and this is going to kind of just be this reinstilling this national pride in Germans. And they were a very fragmented people at that time. And he was telling them everything that they wanted to hear and everything that they needed to hear. And it's a slippery slope. It's amazing what the power of a truly manipulative person, how far off the path people can go. Okay, Maria is not joking. She said, Dana, not everyone grew up in dysfunction. Many parents know to teach age appropriate boundaries. Yes, I do agree with that. But I think teaching them and having them tested are two very different things. And even teaching certain boundaries, I think teaching emotions and intuition, like how things feel when something's off, using your emotions as a big guide to helping set boundaries, that kind of stuff isn't taught and maybe parents are more progressive today than I'm aware of, but I think a lot of times it's kind of just the basics that's taught, if anything. I don't know. Maybe I just have not come across a whole lot of people that I feel, myself included, that have had that many. The people that I know that have had the healthiest boundaries have been the ones that have been through the most garbage and that have worked really hard to get healthy boundaries. And all of the people that I know that have avoided drama and dysfunction in their life, that grew up in, I would say, like, normal, I don't know if I would even say healthy, but like, I guess fairly well-adjusted homes, have a lot of those really twisted beliefs. Commitment is forever. Family is forever. Forgive and forget. No one's perfect. And I just think a person walking around with that kind of ideology, it's just, they're a ticking time bomb and they don't even realize it. Really? Maria says the healthiest people I know had healthy parents. Huh. That has really not been my experience at all. Well, okay, that's a valid point. Maria says, see, Dana, what you just described isn't really healthy. Yeah, I would agree. I would agree. I guess maybe I've never met a healthy person that grew up in a healthy home that really truly taught about boundaries and deal breakers and kind of what and again, like I go back and I've been looking at all these children's books, and a lot of them, like I just think, I'm like, oh my goodness, this stuff sets kids up at a young age to fail. Because about major concepts about setting boundaries and friendship and all of this. And to me, it's if a person's never been through anything remotely abusive, I could see how it would seem healthy. But when you're on the other side of it, you're like, man, no, this is not good. Thomas. Oh gosh, we're over 3 hours. Thomas says, I recently woke up to find out my wife of 22 years I've had 3 children with is a covert narcissist. My family and everyone I work with are also very narcissistic. What should be my intention and direction? Oh my goodness, that is a lot, isn't it? I would encourage you to, gosh, where to even start? I would encourage you to look into, uh, where do you even start? Boundaries. There's a fantastic book on, I think maybe okay. If you're up for reading, There's a few books that I would recommend. There was one book called Healthy Endings by Dr. Henry Cloud, which I thought was fantastic. It talks a lot about work and home life, kind of knowing when to stay and when to go. And then there's another book, The Boundaries After Pathological Relationships by Adeline Birch, which is really great. And it discusses boundaries. But, at the end of the day, whatever direction that you go in, it's really something that, you need to have peace about whatever direction that you head. And so it's definitely not something that, that anybody else can decide for you or kind of walk that path. But those books would be, good starting places. We're doing a book club on, what is it, the 25th of this month. It's on Codependency for Dummies, but it talks a lot about boundaries and kind of reconnecting with your authentic self and, a lot of that stuff. So if you want to join us for that, and we also do these live streams every Wednesday night at 8:30. And really too, I think just reading as much as you can about these, about all of this, about, narcissists and boundaries and just starting to kind of put the pieces together is huge. There's another fantastic book out there if you do go the route of divorcing, called Divorce Poison, which is a great book. So I guess that's what I would recommend is just start really kind of diving into all of this and kind of understanding it and then going from there. Connie, great question. It says, when does book club start? It's 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time it's always the last Thursday of every month. But this book is it's just so good, and it's so chock full of info. We're going to do 2 days on it. But I'm not sure if we're going to do Thursday and Friday, or if we're going to do Thursday, like maybe 2 Thursdays in a row. Maria is talking about this unicorn that you call a healthy person. About a friend of hers who says, yes, healthy and whole. My best friend is so healthy, and it's all from his great parents. No traumas, no dysfunction. He is very lucky. Yes, yes, he is. I would be curious to talk to your friend, and I would be curious to know. I don't know if your friend male or male guy, what he feels his parents, what he viewed his childhood like, and what he feels that his parents did right. I would just really, let's study him and see if we can replicate this kind of stuff in any possible way. Because I am very hard pressed to even really come across, like I said, even with children's books by professionals in this field. There's some stuff where, I always go back and I read like the 1 and 2 star reviews to see kind of what issues people had with stuff. And a lot of their, you can tell, like when people review a book, well, you can tell like what's legitimate and what is just, people having a bad day or being ugly or whatever. But a lot of the 1 star, 2 star reviews, I think, are people that have been abused, because they're seeing those books through those lenses of that. And so when I start going down that route, I really want to make sure that I would, but like keeping all this stuff into consideration and kind of trying to, I don't know, I guess, right, obviously, like write the the, kind of do this topic justice as much as I possibly can. But I would be curious to know what your friend would say. If anything sticks out in his mind about what they did right. I will say, Maria says, yeah, she said, my own therapist pointed out, wow, your best friend is very healthy. He must have had healthy parents. Yes. One big difference that I have noticed between myself and other people, I was actually just talking to another friend about this tonight, is I feel like by and large, people that have had healthier home lives than mine have tend to have fun a lot easier than I do. And same with my friend. Like, it was so weird. Because we were struggling with the same thing today, and we just had this really great conversation about it. But I have noticed that I'm like, man, how a lot of people, obviously, that haven't gone through abuse or trauma, but that have grown up in like a healthier home, tend to be a lot like lighter and freer, and just kind of have an easier time, I think, just unwinding and having a good time. I think I've always been kind of one of those like quote unquote mature children at a very young age. And yeah, so even when I was really young, I had a very hard time really relating to other children my age unless they were very mature. So I always hung out with like older people and tended to date older people, and not like significantly older, but older. And just really had a difficult time kind of interacting with people. I was just very very mature for my age. Like all the way across. When I was 20, I moved out when I was 17. I bought my first house when I was 20. I just have done a lot of things. I remember I went to camp by myself when I think I was in second grade. And my mom still talks about that because my best friend who was going to go with me backed out at the last minute for I don't even know why. And I was like, yeah, I still want to go. I didn't know anybody. And I went alone to camp. And I don't remember it being great. I don't remember it being terrible. I just wanted to go. And my mom was like, we were so ready to come pick you up and waiting for that phone call. And I've always been a really kind of independent, like lone wolf. So Banas says, Dana, do you mean like a parentified child? Because that happens. I can relate to that. I have older friends, but since healing, I have been attracting younger friends, and I just want some playtime now. I think for me, my brother, who has all, and I feel bad even like saying this, but he's always been one of my favorite people, to this day. But when he was a kid, he was a handful. He had ADD and dyslexia. And this was back in the 80s. And so all of this stuff was undiagnosed. My brother was a poster child for both. And he was hyperactive and just no impulse control. And, he was very angry because he was in school and his dyslexia was undiagnosed until like third grade. And so he couldn't read, he couldn't write. And it was very, and, homework time with him was awful. It was a lot of screaming and yelling by him, by my parents, crying by him, probably by my mom. Like, it was just every night was really awful. And so my parents both worked full time. And so I was just kind of left. School was easy for me. I was just, I like to read. So I was kind of a quiet kid anyhow. And, I guess I tuned in pretty early on. Like, I'm just gonna go, I'll be fine, give him the attention he needs it, or, I just learned to entertain myself at a very young age. But that really kind of unintentionally, I think, led to a lot of, I just kind of was invisible for a long time. And, yeah, I didn't realize how difficult that really was for me until fairly recently. So it's just, it is, I mean, it is what it is. So. Healing Vibe says, "Hi, I just popped in at the end. My 3 adult children are completely normal with great relationships. When my upbringing was incredibly dysfunctional, or not, she didn't say incredibly. When my upbringing was dysfunctional, I did opposite to what was done to me." Yeah. And it's so interesting too. So like my stepmother was in an abusive marriage before she married my father. And she has 2 sons. In her house, my stepmom and my dad began dating. I was like 13, but they didn't get married. They didn't live together until like we were all up and out of the house. Thank goodness, because that would have been that would have been awful. But her 2 children, her house was like Coney Island, and it was a free for all. Drinking, smoking, like there were no rules, no bedtime. You could swear, you could do whatever you wanted to do. It was very different from my house. And her children, both of them grew up to be very well-adjusted, nice, normal, decent, solid, good guys, which is really wild considering how they grew up with an abusive dad and my, and just kind of that chaos in that home. So, okay, so we are over. Yeah, Maria says feeling invisible is really damaging. Yes. Yeah, I agree. It is. I didn't realize, I just didn't take that into account, because in a lot of ways it's like neglect. But I think it was because it wasn't intentional and it wasn't malicious that it didn't register. I didn't allow that. I didn't see, I don't know. I didn't like, I always knew on some level that was a problem, but I felt bad. I felt bad, like it was, um, I don't know. So yeah, it's interesting. Interesting when you kind of start putting all these pieces together and you're like, oh, I get it. And then, and too, I was talking to Travis the other day about it. Like, for me, I'm at the place where it's like, there isn't even necessarily blame there. It's just more of insight of, you just start getting these pieces and you're like, oh, I see how all of this fits together now. And then just trying to kind of make peace with the past and make peace with, and then like, you had said the other day, kind of mourning the loss of lost time. And there's just kind of this whole process with acceptance of the overall thing. So yeah, it's quite the journey. Okay, so let's do a guided imagery thing, and then we will call it a night, and then I will go from Yeah. Maria says, Dana, it really seems like you've lived a life of putting others first. Their pain was yours to solve and help. Um, you feel their pain. Yeah, very much. 100%. Yeah. I can't even really, like, it's interesting, like we talk about kind of getting into alignment, and there's certain things with myself that I can feel. I'm like, boy, okay. Like some of these things really need to get more into alignment. But part of me kind of wonders, I'm not sure how much the needle is really going to move. There's certain areas of change, and we're probably all like this, right? Like there's certain areas of change that are kind of like the low hanging fruit that, man, boy, a couple key pieces of insight and boom, boom, boom. Like, yep, that all clicks together. But then there's other things where it's like, uh, I might have like a ton of insight, but I think some stuff is just so deeply rooted that it's really, it just takes a lot more energy to kind of move that needle. And then even still, I feel like I might move a needle a little bit, but it would need quite a ways to go in order for it to get to a healthy place. It's all so fascinating to me. uh, what a journey. What a journey. All of this crazy thing we call life, huh? So, okay, oh, Maria, we should just talk. Just, oh my gosh. We could just go on and on. Oh yes, there's so many instances. I, I. Maria said, real quick, Maria says, Dana, for instance, your resistance to making money off of your work, you see that as wrong. Oh, you did. You emailed me. I will for sure go dig around in my inbox then. New Chris says, this one was great, Dana. Have a tenor. You agreed with someone that atheists might be more narcissistic last week, but I forgive you. Have a great weekend. Did I? Did I say that? I don't know if I think that. Why would I have said that? I'll have to think about that. I don't know. I think that narcissism can, it is ego that to such a problematic degree is it's so pervasive, and it can hide in so many different ways, and it can definitely I would say probably religion is one of its favorite places to hide behind, you know because it twists things. It really can make it seem like, oh, we're such it can hide behind, oh, forgiveness, and oh, the duties of a husband, or oh, the duties of a wife, or subservience, or do you know what I mean? Like there's so many like little twists and turns that ego and abuse and stuff can hide in religion. So I don't know. And I'll have to think about that. But thank you. Thank you for the donation. And of course you guys too for the conversation, and for I hope these help. Sometimes I just feel like I'm blathering on and about and I definitely don't want to make this about like about me and my own journey, because I'm totally fine without needing to air all that on the internet. I do it just because it feels weird talking about other people's stuff. Just kind of FYI, that's why I use my own examples. So it's not that I'm needing to do these live streams to like work through my own stuff. It's just I try, I try to not talk about other people. Wonder Woman says, yet I still love my religion. Yeah. I think, religion is, I don't think there's anything necessarily like inherently wrong with religion. I think it's just, if we can sort out the difference, using that level of discernment between kind of what is God's word and what is, you know, the ego influence on that. Because I think it's that human influence that's when things get twisted into a crazy, awful, dangerous, destructive place. I don't think that's God. So. Okay. So let's do our guided imagery thing because we're over on time. And I'm just trying to get better about that. Okay. So let's take a moment, get comfortable, whatever that might mean for you. If you're in a chair or if you have a place to lay down, and take a few deep breaths and just relax your body. Letting all of the stress and tension of the day leave your body with each exhale. Knowing that at this moment that you are safe and that it is okay to take the time to relax completely. There is nothing else that you need to be doing for the next 10 or 15 minutes. This is a good investment in you, that it's okay to make yourself a priority and that it's okay to relax. And that we don't need to wait until we're not feeling anxious in order to relax, that we can consciously make the decision to relax, probably even more so when we are feeling anxious. Let's bring your awareness starting at the top of your head, bringing your attention almost like a body scan as you work your way down to your eyes, noticing any tension that you might be holding there. Noticing if you're kind of pinching your eyes or squinting and just letting them relax. Bringing your attention down into your cheeks and in your jaw. Letting your jaw relax and fall open. Releasing your tongue from the roof of your mouth. Feeling how it feels to have a fully relaxed jaw. Letting your face relax. Just let it kind of go heavy. Bringing your attention down to your neck and your shoulders. Letting your shoulders drop. And if you're sitting in a chair or laying on the bed, perhaps letting your head fall back as you just relax your neck letting either the pillow or the weight of your body kind of support your neck as you feel how it feels to have a relaxed neck. Moving your awareness down into your chest and allowing your chest to open, and perhaps even kind of rounding your shoulders back, dropping them down. Letting your arms fall down by your side in whatever position is the most comfortable. Bringing your attention down into your lungs as you continue to breathe, with each breath going deeper and deeper into your lungs, filling them deeply with that amazing, wonderful, regenerative oxygen. Noticing your breathing. We so often tend to be either shallow breathers, or we breathe kind of only into the top lobes of our lungs. Notice now as you breathe, bringing that oxygen down, down, down into the lower lobes of your lungs. Feeling what it feels like to actually take a deep breath. And as you exhale, allowing that exhale to completely empty your lungs as much as you can. Noticing the difference between how much air you normally exhale and how deep of an inhale you can do when you're breathing deeply compared to a normal breath that you might take throughout the day. Bringing your attention down into your hips, letting your hips, your lower back, letting those muscles just relax. And noticing that when they do relax, that your legs tend to kind of fall into a position that's comfortable. Noticing if you're storing any tension in your lower back, or perhaps in your butt muscles and your glutes. A lot of people tend to clench and they have lower back and kind of tight back muscles. Feeling how it feels to relax those muscles and noticing the difference when your back and your hips are completely relaxed. Bringing your attention down into your thighs, into your knees, letting your legs kind of rest comfortably and have a natural bend to them. Relaxing your calf muscles, your feet, and your toes. Feeling the heaviness in your body as all of the muscles relax and the tension is released. And let's take the next 5 deep breaths and see if you notice any areas in your body that you're still kind of holding on to any tension or anxiety or pain. And let's send those breaths to any of those areas now. With each breath, letting that area expand And as you release it, letting that tension and anxiety and pain go. Now visualize a light, a beautiful, calm, comforting light, perhaps a light like a flickering candle. Visualize this light in the center of your chest. This light is representative of your energetic self. With each passing breath, visualize this light growing bigger and stronger, as if it's been waiting for you to allow it to come out and grow and grow big and strong. Allow this light perhaps to grow to the size of a tennis ball, a softball, a basketball. As it starts growing larger and larger, comforting you, reassuring you, and healing you with every single breath. This light is pure light. It's love. It's a connection that deeply roots you to everything that is good and right in the world and everything that is good and right within you. And as this light continues to grow with each passing breath, visualize it as it grows, touching every single cell in your body, regenerating, restoring every single cell, realizing that healing happens every single moment of every single day, both ways big and small. Allowing this light to grow larger, to travel up into your head, down into your arms, down into your torso, your stomach, your hips, down into your legs and your feet. Bringing your attention inward, noticing if you can feel the pulsing of that energy in your hands. Now bring your attention down into your feet. See if you can notice the pulsing of that energy in your feet. Now bringing your attention up into the top of your head. And notice if you can feel the pulsing in the top of your head. Notice as that energy travels up and down your legs, your torso, your arms, up into your head. It travels continuously and effortlessly throughout your body. Visualize yourself glowing a beautiful white light. Connecting to everything that is good and right within yourself, everything that is good and right within the world. Taking a moment now to send this light and this love to other people in your life that are special to you, or to anyone else that you might feel could use some light and love sent their way. Visualize giving them an energetic hug, letting them know just how special they are and what they mean to you. Let's do that for the next 7 breaths. And when you're ready, come on back. Make sure to give yourself a big hug, acknowledging that there is a lot that is right and good about you. Acknowledging your healing and that you're doing a great job. You just keep going. Keep going. You're doing a great job. When you're ready, go ahead and open your eyes. Thank you guys so much for joining me. And I will see you guys next Wednesday. Oh my gosh, next Wednesday and next Thursday is going to be book club. So again, we're reading the book Codependency for Dummies. So it's a fantastic book. I am kind of thinking we're going to have to do maybe this Thursday, no, or I'm sorry, next Thursday, the 25th for book club, and then the Thursday after that. So we'll go from there, but we'll figure it out next week. You guys have a fantastic week and take care. So lots of love to you guys. You are not alone. You are not crazy, and you really can move forward and heal from this. So take care. Good night.